Hey friends, I'm Scott Hanselman.
And I'm Maria Nagaga.
And this is Microsoft Virtual Academy. We're going to be talking about ASP.NET Core 2.
Yes, we are.
All right, we've got 3 days of great content for you. This is the beginner day. We're going to have beginner getting started, a little bit about .NET and C# and the resources that you'll need. Maria and I will explore creating a web application. And by the end of these 3 days, you should be ready to go and make a web application for yourself.
Exactly. And a good place to get started here is for people to figure out where to get the tools they need to get started.
Yep. So if you go to .net, we made a little fun domain for you here, dot.net. Or if you go out there and search with your favorite search engine for Learn C# or download .net, you will probably end up showing up here. The page might look something like this, might be a little different by the time you have, time has passed. But you'll click on download and you're going to see 3 different .nets to choose from. There is the .NET framework that comes with Windows. There is Xamarin, which lets you make iOS and Android and Windows applications. We're going to be focusing today on .NET Core, aren't we?
Yes, we are. So if you click on that, it should show you a couple of options on how to get started. And a lot of things that come up, especially for new people to our platform, is do they download the SDK or the runtime?
Right. So the SDK, that's the tools, the compiler, the stuff I need as a developer, because it's the software development kit.
Yep.
So you probably will never want the runtime unless you're going to put that into production. And then if you really want more information, you can follow step-by-step instructions down here at the bottom.
Yeah, and we should actually click on one of those. Click on the Windows one, and you should see not only a step-by-step, but also a few videos in between.
Right, so we've got a little video. This is very, very short, 2 or 3 minutes. Not as fun as this video, but still. You download the .NET SDK. It'll pick the right version for you. And then by the end of this little 3 or 4 step process, you will have written your first .NET app, which I think we'll do in a little bit. All right? So you can also, of course, get your different versions of Linux. You can do it on a Mac. And you can also use Docker. So there's a lot of options. .NET Core runs everywhere.
Everywhere. And you can get this all run in 10 minutes.
Or less, really.
Oh.
So the other thing that you might want to think about is our documentation. If you go to docs.microsoft.com, and you'll get the country, your country of choice, this docs right here has got all the different docs through all the different Microsoft properties. So Azure and Xamarin and bots and all kinds of fun stuff. When you go to .NET, there's a ton of great things. And we're going to go through this a little bit more and show you some of the fun things inside. But remember, we're focusing on .NET Core, C# and ASP.NET.
That's what we're doing.
All right. And the last thing that you want to think about is Visual Studio.
And their Visual Studio options. So you have Visual Studio IDE, which is on Windows, right? And if you scroll across just a little bit, there's Visual Studio Code. And if you scroll just a little bit down onto the next level, you'll see the different options. So you have Visual Studio for Mac now as well. And you can build your ASP.NET Core application there. So anything that we're doing today, people can do this on their Mac.
Good point. So even though I'm on a Surface Book, I'm running Windows, literally every single thing that we're going to show you today, you should be able to follow along on your Mac, on your Ubuntu machine, on your Windows machine. I will be using Visual Studio Code a little bit. I'll be using Visual Studio a little bit. But you should be able to follow along in your favorite editor. All right?
Yeah.
Cool. We'll take a quick pause, and we'll come back with the next module.
So let's build our first app. Scott, do you trust me?
I do trust you. All right, so I've installed the .NET Core SDK. I just downloaded this, and I went through the installer.
So you've done this, so it's one of those things of like, we did it in the past.
Well, how do I know it worked?
Okay, so go over to your command line.
Okay.
And type .NET -version. Oh, you already did it. Okay,
Well,
so
I just typed .NET by itself.
So it actually shows that it exists. Otherwise, you would have got some error.
That's a good point. And actually, I could type where.NET, and it'll tell me not only that it exists,
where it is,
but where it is on the disk. And you see it's in program files.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's make sure that you're using the right version. So we're on 2.0, so .NET -version.
Okay.
Okay.
And I got 2.02. You'll get 2.0 something.
Yeah.
And this is a patch version. It's like a...
Like some minor changes have happened.
But 2.0 is what matters.
Okay.
Okay. So I've done that. What else can I do?
So so people are comfortable, let's do a .NET help, because it's always good for people to know that there's a place that they can go and see what's happening. So if you type .NET help, let's just see what happens.
Right. So I can type .NET --help, and any of these commands have help. Like there's help throughout the whole thing.
Everything. So it tells you if you wanted to do something new, restore packages, run them. This is a good rundown of everything you need to know that you can use with the .NET command.
Now, a lot of this might not be familiar. Some of it might be confusing. But we're going to focus kind of on the basics. And I think that making stuff and running stuff and building stuff is probably where we'll start for
That's where we'll be right now.
For this module.
That's where we'll be right now.
OK.
One of the cool things, especially with .NET 2.0, is the number of templates that have come out of the box in the command line.
OK, what is a template?
So a template is, I think of it as a starting ground, something that gives you a form or structure that helps you write your code eventually. So for those of you who are out there and you've used PowerPoint, and PowerPoint has different templates that gives you styles and guidelines, think about this as your PowerPoint for your code.
OK, so I've got console apps and web apps and test apps and all different flavors.
Different kinds of apps, which we will actually have a look at. So should we go and see what kind of apps they give us?
All right, let's do it.
So let's have a look at .NET New. That's what I always type.
.NET New. All right, I get a nice table. And actually, some stuff scrolled by. So these are options for .NET New. And it's worth pointing out that we've got help again, which is actually help for new. And this is a little an interesting thing to point out very briefly. When I type .NET -- help, I get top-level help. When I type .NET new -- help, I get help for new.
That is actually the first time I've done this all the time, but I've never noticed
Isn't that great? Well, what's also interesting is if I type .NET new something, I can get the help for that template.
Could you run that and we could see?
So this is the console application template.
OK.
And here's help options specifically for the console. And why this is useful is that let's say that I go and get a third-party template. I get a template from somewhere else. That template might have a lot of complicated options and switches of its own. So .NET -- help is top level. .NET new -- help is help for new. And then if I put -- help for a specific template name, I'm going to get the help for that, which is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
All right.
I've literally found that out during this recording.
See, and I'm going to learn from you, and you're going to learn from me. We're going to have a great time.
Okay.
So I just went back to what you told me to do. I said .NET new.
OK.
I see a list of templates, and I'll see a list of short names.
And you also see a different languages as well that are supported. Right?
And in this case, C# is in brackets. That's indicating that it is the default. But we can also do F#, which is a great functional language, or VB, which is a good language for beginners to try out. OK? All right, so let's make one. You want to make a folder then?
Yes, so let's make a folder.
My console app. All right, so I have an empty folder here.
Exactly. And because we're going to build a console app, .NET new console.
A new console. And a console app is one that just kind of in text mode here.
Exactly.
Right.
So let's have a look at what happened when you type .NET new console over there.
So it says the template was created.
Successfully.
And then it ran .NET restore for me. So in the past, after I typed .NET new, I used to have to say restore. What is it restoring?
So it's restoring some of the packages, which we'll have a look at, what comes in there.
And the packages are those libraries, those dependencies, the things that it needs
to actually
be a console app. Yeah. And then it generated a file, and it told me that it took a certain number of milliseconds. So we got a program.cs, and we got a CS proj, or a C# project.
And the C# project that's where all our packages are.
That's where our references to those packages are. So let's go and just look at that. I'm just going to say type and output that, because it's a very small file.
It's really small.
It says that it's using the .NET SDK, the software development kit. It's an executable, and it's a .NET 2 app. And it doesn't have any dependencies beyond the basics. It does have some dependencies for outputting to the console and things like that, but for the most part, it includes the .NET SDK, and we have no additional references. OK. So how do I do something with this? Like, what does it actually do?
Let's see so let's run it.
Code.
OK.
Here's the code. Hello world. Pretty straightforward. So we'll do a quick run. Is that OK?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Now, there's a moment here. 1, 1000, 2, 1000, 3. Do you know what it was doing? Why did it take 3 seconds to say hello world?
This is the first time you're running the application.
It's got to build it, right? And but I've been doing this at the command line. We don't want to spend a lot of time at the command line.
No. So shall we look at it at code?
So we'll use Visual Studio Code, and it's worth pointing out if I zoom in down here that I've got both Visual Studio 2017, which is a Windows IDE, and I've got Visual Studio Code, which is a cross-platform IDE. So if you're on a Mac, it's a text editor, it's a code editor.
Yeah.
It's a little bit less stuff, but it's very lightweight, and it is cross-platform, so we'll use that. Now, I'm going to type code dot, and dot is the current folder.
And it's actually built in now, right? Correct?
Yeah, I'll show you actually. We'll go ahead and run that, and then there's a command inside of Visual Studio Code that adds it to the path. So it's something that you want to do after you've run code the first time. So we'll go ahead and run that. Okay, and Visual Studio Code opens that up. And then this is interesting. Visual Studio Code pops up a warning here. Hey, stuff I need to build this is missing. Do you want me to add them? And then it's got a yes and no over here. So watch on the left side here where it says bin and obj. I'm going to hit yes, but you're going to watch here on the left.
Oh, there it is.
See? So this is just some stuff that VS Code created for itself. It's not about C#. It's just about VS Code. In order to be able to launch this app. These are just configuration files. So you don't need to worry about those, but that is something that you want to say yes to. Right?
So if someone's doing this for the first time, say yes, but don't touch?
Don't touch. Don't worry about it. Nothing you need to do in there. And then you had mentioned about the path. If you hit Control P, and I think it's Command P or fancy Macintosh button P on a
It is
Mac.
Command P, yeah.
Command P, is that what it's called? There's a bunch of actions. So that brings up this palette. I just think P for palette. And then if you say, what is this here? The greater than symbol?
Yeah.
I think it's called, is it add path? Where is it? There's a bunch of commands in here, and one of them adds code to the path. Maybe it's happening automatically now, but I did that once. You can see also here that there's other options like your color theme and the default shell and things like that.
Yeah, and the VS Code website has really good documentation about all the little bitty internals that are happening on the editor.
Yeah, it's incredibly easy to edit, to modify, to change the colors, the behavior. So yeah, feel free to explore. That's beyond the scope of what we're going to do. I'm just going to double click though on program.cs, and I'll zoom in a little bit. And we've got our application right here.
And I think it's always good for people to play around with the console.writeline. Like put your name in it, run it again, remove the semicolon and see what kind of errors you get. It's a really good way to get comfortable with the language.
Now I can make a change,
Yeah.
hit Control S. I could Alt-Tab back over to here, type .NET Run again.
Yeah.
It'll build. There's that pause. Then it runs, says hello, Scott. Then I could Alt-Tab back over here. But that can get a little tedious.
Yeah. So is there something in Visual Studio Code that people can use now?
Remember when I was over here, one of the options was Terminal, select default shell.
Yeah.
I can hit Control, and I think it's called the tilde,
Yeah, you mean the squiggly thing?
the squiggly
Yeah,
thing.
it's a tilde. I always called it the squiggly thing until I started the
I
documentation.
think our Spanish friends would not call it that. But yes, it's the character that goes over the top of the ñ.
Yeah.
So you hit Control tilde, and you can, of course,
Select your shell.
select that your own way. You can pick your own shell. I'm using PowerShell in this case. Now I'm actually in a little command line prompt within Visual Studio Code itself. So now, rather than having to go and say, Alt-Tab
Yep.
and then do that, I can do it all from here. Okay, so there's my hello, Scott, right there. Okay, that's one way to do it. But still, I'd like to do some interactive debugging. I'd like to do something a little bit more sophisticated than that, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to move the mouse over in the left here, and you see this red dot.
Yeah, that's a breakpoint.
Yep. I'm going to click on it, make a breakpoint right here. And then I'm going to go and click on the little bug.
Well, that's pretty intuitive, actually.
I think so, because there's going to be bugs. I know that for a fact. Now, this text right here, this .NET Core launch, the way that it knows to do that is because I said yes earlier.
To the launch.
If I didn't say yes, I would not be able to do that debugging.
Okay.
Okay? And Visual Studio Code can do other languages as well, like Node and Python and things like that. So that file will be different depending on what language you're using. All right, so I'll hit Start Debugging. And then it's going to go and build it. And it's thinking, and it's thinking. And there you go. So now we have stopped the application before we said hello world. We're just sitting right here. And I can hover over different variables. I can see if there's any local variables. Actually, we can do this real quick. Let's hit stop. We'll say var I equals Maria, var j equals 9. Hit debug again. See?
Yeah.
And then we've got debugging. We can look at our call stack. And it's a whole interactive experience.
It's pretty rich.
It is pretty rich. Given that it is a cross-platform code editor, it's pretty fantastic. And it's also worth pointing out not just the squigglies that it's giving us. If we look here, there's some warnings, like as it's saying, well, you used I, but you never did anything with it.
Yeah.
But also, sometimes you can get, what's the word? What is this here? What is that called?
The light bulb.
The light bulb. Mm-hmm. So I could go and say, I want to extract that method or remove that variable. Right? So you can do little refactorings. It's going and saying, well, really this is used for nothing. There's no reason for that line to be there. And I can click on this and it'll fix it. And in this case, it'll fix it by removing you entirely. Sorry.
That sounded rather intentional.
That was not the intent. All right. So Visual Studio Code will be what we'll use for a little while, and then we'll eventually graduate to Visual Studio proper, which has even more features. All right? So that gives you a sense of, oh, and actually, I'm sorry, we never talked about IntelliSense.
Yeah, so let's add a read line, because one of the first things that you do is input and output, right?
Mm-hmm. So right line is our output.
Yeah.
I'll start typing console, and you'll notice that it's
console.
It's giving me IntelliSense.
Not only, it's also for beginners, it's great to see it also shows you what that means.
Yep, you're getting like a little bit of documentation there. That's right. They'll say console dot. See, this is nice. You said read line. See, and this is coming out of the docs here, and it'll tell you the things that could go wrong. Read line. Yeah, reads the next characters from the input stream, and then notice the squiggly.
Yeah.
Expected a semicolon. Go like that. Cool. And then I'll do this from the command line over here. I'll say .NET run 1.1000, 2.1003. And now it's paused, right? Because it's waiting for me to read the line. Press enter.
And it did.
Okay. So you've got IntelliSense, you've got debugging, all of that, of course, being driven by this here. And just very briefly, because it's nice to see some of the internals. When we clicked here, remember that this text here, .NET Core Launch, comes out of this config file right here.
Oh.
Right? The reason that I'm showing you that is it's important to know that there's no magic. We're not hiding anything from you, right? You might not necessarily ever want to change that, but it's nice to know that the thing that drives the debugger underneath is just a text file. And here, it's going to go and run our program. When we say .NET Run, our program is really here, myconsoleapp.dll, and it's going to go and call that. And then if we want to go and attach to the debugger, there's also the ability to run the app, and then after the fact, attach to it, and then debug it once it's already running. All of that is possible with Visual Studio Code.
I think it's also worth showing the audience where to go and read more about what's happening with Visual Studio Code.
Mm-hmm. So Visual Studio Code is up at code.visualstudio.com. And there's a really rich marketplace as well for extensions. There's lots of stuff. So you can use Visual Studio for C# like we are, or Python, or C++, or Go, or a million different things. And their docs are really lovely. There's lots of different things you can learn about. You can change styles, you can change behavior, you can integrate it with your source control like Git or VSTS.
You can create your own Extensions as well.
Yep, there's a whole section here exactly on extension authoring.
I think my favorite extension would have to be the Slides extension. Have you seen that one?
Slides. I like the one with the funky icons. So this one here like gives you fun icons for all of your.
And I think they've moved some of those experiences into actual Visual Studio now.
Some of these extensions end up becoming a part of Visual Studio itself. So what's the one you like? Slides?
Yeah. So you can actually write your PowerPoint slides.
Where'd it go?
I don't know.
Uh-oh. The one I like is GitLens. GITLENS. See, that's weird. Maybe their search isn't working today. Oh, it's actually GitLens with a space in between. So GitLens is a great one that lets you have annotations of who changed your code and when.
Oh, okay. So it's similar to how you can do it in Visual Studio, where you can actually look at everyone.
Yeah, like blame, if you want to see whose fault it was. So here you can see that it was Eric's fault 2 days ago, and he made a change from this to this.
Yeah, I've seen your name on a couple of those too. I'm kidding.
Yes.
I have not. The one I was talking about is Reveal. Reveal. So if anyone's heard of Reveal.js, it enables you to actually, have a slide experience in the browser. So
yeah. So you've got the ability to edit Markdown and do all kinds of things.
Exactly.
So really can't recommend VS Code enough. But if you're just getting started like we are today, Visual Studio Code is going to be your best bet for your editing and your debugging experience.
Yes, it is.
All right. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
So we looked at how to build our very first console application. And one of the great things about the .NET community is about the documentation that we have right now.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of great docs. And I know it's silly sometimes to talk about how great the docs are, but really, the docs are very, very good. If you go to docs.microsoft.com, you can click on .NET, or you can go /.NET. There's a ton of documentation here. There's the .NET Core Guide, which will have tutorials. It'll talk about ASP.NET Core that we're going to talk about as well. And it's worth pointing out the difference between the .NET Core Guide and then the language guides.
Yeah, and you'll see there are different language guides. We have VB, we have C#, we have F#.
Right, so these are the guides that will give you understanding of the syntax of the language and how to call the methods, and then the .NET Core framework itself, and all of those methods are available from C#, F#, and Visual Basic.
And it's really important for people to actually learn the language a little bit more before they start looking at the platform itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we did a Hello World. I installed the .NET Core SDK, and I ran it from the command line, and then I opened it up in Visual Studio Code. Do I have to install that stuff to say hello world?
No, you don't anymore.
Okay.
We actually have something right in the documentation. If you go over to Quick Starts under C#, so C# Quick Starts, it will drop you right into the Quick Start page. And this shows you from the Hello World experience how to get started with numbers in C#, declaring variables. It shows you some really fun examples that you can start playing around with. So if you...
So I've got a .NET editor here in my browser. I'll go and copy console.write line
or you can
over
just
here.
click on the copy as well.
Okay,
over
click
there.
on copy, hit run, and now it's running in the cloud, and it brought the result over here. So the .NET SDK is not installed on my machine.
No.
It is happening right here.
Exactly, and you can go in and edit that, and maybe...
So I can make changes to this kind of code, I can do it however I want, and then the output will appear down here.
Absolutely.
And I can mess with, look at this, I can do all kinds of fancy stuff. So if I bring in really complicated code and mess with strings, I can do that. And then follow through with some online challenges.
So it's actually designed as a complete challenge that's supposed to take 28 minutes at the very most, step by step, gives you examples of what needs to be done. The editor that's working in the browser right now is in preview, so if people see any bugs, they're more than open. We're really excited for you guys to give us any feedback there.
Sure, and then you can report those on the GitHub repository. And speaking of GitHub, in fact, all of .NET is open source, so it's important to remember that it is all on GitHub. So if you go to github.com/.net, github.com/.net, you'll come here to the .NET Foundation, and it is within there that all the source code is there. Now, as a beginner, you might not necessarily care about that source code, but it's just nice to know it's there.
Yeah, and they also do have samples within most of the repos that they can start playing around with.
Actually, that is a good point. It's all there. You can go and look at the core CLR, and the docs themselves are also open source.
Yes, they are. So if you see any typos, if you see any options that you'd like to look at, you could do that. So if you click on the edit over there.
So I'm here on, for example, getting started with .NET Core.
Yep.
And you said click on edit. Where do I end up at? Well, I end up at GitHub.
Yep.
So I can be a contributor to open source by even fixing a spelling error or changing a bit of code that might be incorrect.
Exactly.
All right. All of this is under the .NET Foundation GitHub, and you can also check out the .NET Foundation at .NETFoundation.org. Oh, there you are.
There I am.
You just flew by there. So the .NET Foundation is a nonprofit, an independent nonprofit that tries to support the .NET ecosystem. All right. There's lots of open source projects that are within it. You can set up a local meetup or find a local meetup near you. We've got meetups all over the world.
Wow, literally all over the world.
We really do, actually. And there's one on every continent. And you also have a show called Code Conversations.
Yeah, the way thing about Code Conversations is it's 5 to 10 minute videos that we sit down with engineers or people working in different open source projects, and they tell us a little bit of how to get started on that project.
So you can check that out. That's on YouTube and also on Channel 9, which is our TV channel. And again, I want to encourage people to check out the meetups. There's about 1,200 different meetups locally, user groups, not locally, rather worldwide. You can learn open source. You can sit and find friends to code with. You can pair up. You can do all kinds of things. And if there's no one nearby you, you could even potentially Skype people.
That's actually a good idea. A Skype meetup.
I do that all the time. I have lots of different opportunities where I sit with people and learn code and pair, but we do it remotely.
Oh, and you can do that with Skype interviews as well.
That's true. All right. So just a reminder, you can go to docs.microsoft.com, check out the quick starts to run your C# programs in the browser. Also a great way to maybe introduce your young people or new programmers to coding in C#. And then if you start at either GitHub or the .NET Foundation, you can jump off to all of these different locations. And then one other thing worth pointing out, as I just saw it fly by, was .NET Conf.
Yep. There is a lot of great content that came out of .NET Conf.
This was a conference in 2017, and you can go and check out the sessions for .NET Conf up here at .NETconf.net. There were 45 different sessions, so about 45 hours of content that you can learn some of the more advanced techniques.
Yeah.
So when you're done here at Microsoft Virtual Academy, you can maybe dig into that more advanced stuff.
Exactly.
All right. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back and make a web application.
Yes, we will.
Hey, friends. All right. So we have made a console app.
Yep.
We have explored the documentation. We've installed the .NET Core SDK and Visual Studio Code.
Yes.
All right. Next, let's make a web application.
Exactly.
All right. So if we look at my screen here, we have the folder that I have my console app.
And so we have to create a brand new folder.
Right. I just want to point out that all that did was a write line, and it output it to the console. Not particularly impressive. There's no web There's no web browser here. There's just hello, Scott.
Yeah, we need to, like, when you're learning about a web framework, you want to do something on the web.
Absolutely.
So
I just want to juxtapose the difference between the two. So let's take a look at that. All right?
Yeah.
So what do you want me to do?
So can I teach you a new trick?
Let's do it.
That you can create your web application and a directory at the same time.
Are you sure?
I can.
Because I like making directories.
I know, but like try something new. Try something new.
All right.
Okay.
I'll try it.
So .NET New, web, -O.
-O.
Yeah. And let's call it my web app. So in the previous video, we looked at the different .NET templates that are available. Web is just one of the templates. So we looked at console, and now we're looking at web, just for people who might be tuning in now.
Okay.
So hit enter.
So it says the template core empty being created successfully, and it put it in a folder called my web app. So I like to go and make the directory, then go into the directory, and you're saying I can go -O, it'll make the folder and name the thing all at the same time.
At the same time. And if you think about it, if somebody's following this outside of Windows, the way they create a directory might be different.
That is a valid point. You're right, because I said MD, and they might say makedir, and that's a good point. All right. And when I did that, just as you said, we did a .NET New Web, which is this one. This is an empty one. And there's different web options that we'll explore later. But right now, we made the simplest possible
Exactly.
web
Just like
application.
the step just above a console line, just
Okay.
right above it.
So we can go into, let's go into the My Web App. And I see a CS proj, which makes sense. I see a program.cs, which I had before.
But there's something different.
I see a startup CS and a www root. Now, we could poke around here at the command line, but you showed me that VS Code is better.
It's pretty good.
It is better. So let's go into there. Now, this is interesting. By the way, I typed code dot. It opened up my web application. It's worth pointing out that if you notice in the background there, it also opened my previous windows. VS Code likes to put things back the way it was.
Okay.
Right? So it's restoring my session. I'm going to go ahead and close the console app from earlier. And we'll just say, there's that warning again. Required assets to build. It's totally OK to say yes because we want to be able to debug our web application. All right.
So I noticed that you have a couple of things down there. Are those additional?
Yeah, that's a great point. So down here, I've got some extensions. These are like a little accordion extensions if I want to play with Docker or if I'm going to be using Git. So GitLens and Docker are extensions. If I click over here on the left, you can see my installed extensions and recommended extensions. And I could go and search for extensions here as opposed to using the web.
All right.
Okay, so I was just moving them out of the way.
All right, because I just noticed something different, so I was asking questions for the people at home.
Definitely useful. So let's just move that out of the way. Here we go. So program.cs, this is a little bit bigger than it was before.
Because it's bringing in a bunch of stuff that, if we look at the previous one, where we pretty much only had using systems and maybe I/O.
Actually, that's a good point. Let's open up the CS proj.
Yeah.
If you recall, earlier, our SDK was Microsoft.net.SDK.
Yeah.
Here it is .web. This is a web application. This is new, indicating that there's a folder called www root that we'll talk about in a little bit. And we have our first package reference, ASP.NET Core, specifically .all.
So literally everything.
Right. Now, it could, in fact, be listed one item at a time. ASP.NET's broken up into lots of different pieces. So it's kind of a cafeteria plan.
Okay.
This is a package of packages. So rather than having a list of dozens of different packages and having to pick ones I want, ones I don't want, this makes it much, much simpler. It just gives me everything by default. So for learning, it's easier. For getting started, it's easier. If you're familiar with ASP.NET, it's easier because everything you expect is there.
And it's also, one thing I've also noticed is it is one version now.
It is nice and simple. You just say, I want 2.0, and it brings in everything that hangs off of it.
Off 2.0, okay.
It's I call it a meta package or a package of packages.
I like that term, packages of packages.
Yeah, nice and simple. So if we go into program.cs, you saw before we had using system.
Yep.
And when we say using system, that was what allowed us to type console.writeline, because system.console.writeline. But here, this is a web application, and we have other stuff. We brought in some threading and some I/O stuff, but this is the ASP.NET stuff that's added. What's worth pointing out, though, is our main here is different than our console main. Before, we had a console.writeline, and that was it.
Yep.
And actually, you know, this is totally off script, which implies, of course, that we have a script, right? I wonder if I could do this. Okay, I just have a main, and I've commented out all the web stuff.
So what would happen?
Let's find out. I wonder if it'll work. Remember, I'm going to type Control tilde, or tilde?
I think it's tilde. And I think if you say tilde, you might have an accent of some sort.
I think it would be an accent that is completely and totally incorrect.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so it actually switched it over to a console application.
Right. Well, it didn't really switch it over because it always was a console application. The
yes.
idea being that they're the same thing, right? A .NET application has a main, a main entry point, and then it does some stuff. And I just wanted to kind of juxtapose that it can do some console-y stuff, or it can do some webby stuff.
So let's do some webby stuff. Like
right.
what would it look like out of the box?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. So let's go back. .NET Run, this time, having changed it to say build web host. And it's going to run and build. And it says a couple of things. It's running in production. It's listening on localhost 5000. So we have started a little web server.
Okay.
Now it says listening on localhost 5000. Let's open up the browser. And let's localhost 5000 it.
Couldn't you also just click on the link within the terminal?
Yeah, that is a good point. I guess I could. Or not.
Or not. Okay.
I don't know. Yes.
It should.
It should work.
So that's Hello World.
That's hello world, exactly.
So where is that Hello World coming from? Where is
that text?
there's the text itself. So
Yeah, let's find out. So let's follow it through. So build web host passes these arguments in and says .run. What does build web host do? That's right here.
yeah.
Looks like it creates a default web builder, and then it says use startup.
And
And
then
you can see here that the startup text here is in blue. That means it's a keyword basically. This here, this word startup, is telling it use this class. This class's name is not magic. If I changed it to foo,
it would not.
well, let's find out. Let's go ahead and change it to foo. Hit .NET run. And see what happens. The type or name startup could not be found. Okay? But what if I change this to foo?
There we go.
Pause. Runs just fine. The point there being that the name startup isn't magic.
It isn't magic. It does
Right.
not have to be startup.
No. What it's saying is that, again, if we look at the docs, and this is what's nice with Visual Studio Code, it says specify the startup type to be used by the web host. So it's just saying go and use this class. And this class here that we called startup or foo or whatever has to just be shaped a certain way. It has to look a
Okay.
certain way.
So you could call it Beyonce. You could call it anything. You could. Yeah. There has to be a Beyonce.
I am afraid I should probably have a accent aigu, but we'll just have Beyonce without an accent, and it should work just fine. Beyonce should be a keyword,
It
a
should
reserved,
be.
a reserved
It should be.
word,
It
but it's
should.
not, sadly. So this is an important point, though. It's saying use this startup type, and that startup type has to have certain methods. So Beyonce, in this case, has to have a method called configure services and one called configure.
Okay.
And that's the requirements for Beyonce in this context, for the startup class. So what's going on in these?
And we have the nice little instructions at the top, which I've always appreciated.
Yeah, I like it when templates include a little bit of
Yeah.
instructions, a little bit of comments. So this method gets called by the runtime, and it adds services to a collection called the service collection. And services are just stuff you might want to use later in your app.
So it could be things like authentication, so using a service like Facebook or Google, like which we'll look at later dates, but
So if I just
Yeah,
say
there it
services
is.
dot, you've got add authentication, add caching, add identity, add logging, add memory, add whatever. And even things that don't appear, like you pointed out, like maybe Facebook authentication
Yeah.
or different kinds of, those are all other third-party things that could be added on as well. So those services get configured here, get added to this collection.
Yeah.
And it's a little confusing because you've got configure services.
then you have configure.
And then
Like that is
configure.
something that confused me when
Yeah.
I first started.
It is confusing. This is the get everything ready, load up the collection of stuff I want to play with,
Yeah.
and then configure them, set them up.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could have maybe they could have named it like add services, or do the stuff with the services,
Okay.
and then configure them. But
Yeah, okay.
the point is that one is prep your environment and then do specific things to set your environment up. Like in this case, if we're doing development, not production, then when you get an exception, you'd like a nice, friendly page.
Okay, another page of horror.
Yes, not the scary page. This here is the app run. This is the default because you said we wanted to do empty. And you asked where hello world was.
And there it is.
There it is. So we've changed that text. And .NET run. It should still run. Now if I come back over here, notice it still says hello world.
Yeah.
That's because we haven't hit refresh. And there it is.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
You like that?
Yeah.
Excellent.
I think the Beehive would be happy.
They would be. All right. Cool.
This is cool. One of the things that when you are working, so we've seen Hello World or like Hello Beehive in honor of Beyonce, but as a person who's building their web page for the very first time, you want to see a page. Like you actually want to see something that's a little bit more than just
A string.
a string.
Right.
So
and certainly having a string, like doing all of your work inside of a response.write is going to break down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Right. So in the next section, we're going to go and add some pages and take this, and we're going to start from empty though.
Yeah.
We're not going to cheat. We're going to build on top of empty. So we've seen a console app. We've seen an app that does a single string. Next section, we'll do pages.
Yes, we will. So we're back, and we're going to be looking at pages. In the previous module, we looked at building our very first empty web application, but it didn't really do much, right?
Nope.
It just returned a string. And when I think about building a page, I don't know if you think about this the same way. I want to see some HTML. I want to see a physical page structure. And if you actually go back to the project folder, like all the files that we have, I don't see a single page.
Right. This is not page focused right now.
No.
It's string focused. And while I could go and maybe, boldface Beyonce, it's going to break down very quickly.
Yeah.
So this is we need a page focused framework.
We do. And just to bring it back even just a little bit more, you talked about configuring services and configure. And we're going to configure our first service here.
Right.
Yeah. So if you type service.add_MVC.
So if I say services.add, I get all these choices
Yeah.
that we saw before. And these are all the different things that can be layered on top of our application.
Yes.
And it's important to understand, like we talked about before, when we pop back out to programs, this is just a main. Remember we did a console app a second ago, but we're building up this pipeline of services. So what service do you want me to add?
MVC. So
Add MVC. So this is going to add all the model view controller services that I would potentially want to use.
Exactly.
Okay, now I added it. There was a squiggle, and then the squiggle was gone. Did it just magically become an MVC app?
No, because remember, we configure our services, and then we need to configure. So we actually have to use it.
We have to use them. We add them, and then we use them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it would be app use MVC. And I don't think we need
It's worth pointing out all the different use stuff.
a lot of them.
There's your Facebook, your Google, your different, what's called middleware. You'll hear about middleware during the advanced stuff, but we're making some middleware right now. There's two options there. The default route or the regular use MVC. We're just going to say use MVC by itself. And there's a bunch of options you can pass in. We'll talk a little bit about routing later. So I say use MVC. So now MVC's in the pipeline.
Yeah. So we can start taking advantage of it. I don't think you would need the last lines, though.
Well, let's find out if it still runs. All we've done is add MVC and use MVC. Does Hello Beehive still happen? Yes, and now it's bold because I bold-faced it. Okay? All right. So that points out that it's in the pipeline, but it didn't change the behavior of anything.
Yeah, because it hasn't been used at this point.
Well, we haven't added any pages.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I do not think, since we're going to be using MVC, I don't think we need app run anymore.
I want to keep it in there, though, if you don't mind, because when we add our pages, I want to see the relationship between this, which is now called the default route.
Okay.
Default route. This is the thing that happens if this doesn't happen.
Okay.
In the sense of it runs in order.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So let's do the pages you want to add and see if if Beyonce shows up randomly.
Yeah, and you mentioned something pretty significant for a lot of newbies, is that the order in which your code is written matters.
It very much does, especially when you're adding and using things in certain order. I believe that if we went and moved MVC down here, we would have a very different experience.
Exactly.
And we can maybe experiment with that once we add a few pages.
Yeah, let's add that in.
Okay.
Okay. So first thing I want to do is add a new folder.
All right.
Yep.
So I'm over here in Visual Studio Code, and I can right-click and say New Folder, or I can click these buttons. I'm going to right-click and say a new folder because I have found that depending on what's currently clicked on, when you say New Folder,
You might end up somewhere else.
it can sometimes be like one folder down. So you just got to watch out for that. So I'm confirming that my Pages folder you had me add is at the same level and not like accidentally
In dub root.
or in
Somewhere
bin or wherever. So it can be a little confusing. All right, so I have a Pages folder.
Okay. And now we actually need to add a page. So if you write a new file, and we're going to add a index.cshtml.
C# HTML.
Yeah, so I always called it C# HTML, but I was told that that wasn't right.
It's not? It's just a razor page.
It's just a razor page, yes.
Okay, ignore that extension
Okay.
that so clearly says CSHTML.
Exactly. Okay.
All right?
It does. So first thing we want to do is add a page directive. So it would be at page.
Okay, so at page. So a directive starts with at.
Yeah.
Okay,
And we'll be seeing a couple of those throughout the day and seeing what you can do with that.
all right.
And we're just going to write some HTML. So let's just use a H1.
Okay, H. Oh, and I get IntelliSense, which is nice.
Hello, Beyonce.
Cool.
Imagine if Beyonce actually learns how to code on one of these videos.
And I don't have a fancy keyboard.
You want to make sure you.
I've got a respecter.
You got to respect the babe.
There we go.
That's. She will
You appreciate
appreciate
that?
that when one day when she does watch
Yeah,
this
when
video.
she does watch this
When
and
she
invite
does
me to
watch
her
this
house for
video.
lunch. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Do I need to do anything else?
Yeah. Did you save it?
Yep.
So let's just see what happens. Let's run this.
All right. Gonna go and run it. It's gonna fire up localhost 5000. All right.
Wow.
That's interesting. So index.cshtml appears to be the default,
Yes.
and I wonder if I changed its name. Okay,
Let's give it a try.
and then just hit refresh.
No, you'd actually now have to.
No, look, where's that string come from?
Oh, it came from line. Go back. Yeah, it came from line 31.
Right. So the point here is that useMVC added some default routing, some behavior. When
Yeah.
you say routing, it's like when the URL comes in, it has to make a decision about who's handling this.
Exactly. So if you went back to your page and you did /Fred, would it pop up?
Ooh, that's a good question. /Fred. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So now we're starting to learn a little bit about the behavior.
So by default, just because it's called index, some magic, not magic, with MVC defaults it as a default route.
Right, right.
Okay. So if we added another page, and maybe we're going a bit too crazy here.
You want to add another named page?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you want to call it? Solange?
Yeah, Oriana, or whatever you want.
All right. So, okay, so here's another one. This page is at, I'm thinking it's at
/Solange, right?
Solange, right?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll just put that in a paragraph tag to be correct. Oops. See how Visual Studio Code is trying to be helpful? I should have just opened up my my P to start with. There we go.
Okay. So if you.
So there's our default. Oops, did I not run it again?
I don't think you did.
Okay, so I done and run. So there's our default. And that one is not showing up.
It is not.
Why don't we put it in a folder
Within a folder? Okay.
and then call it index?
So it would have to be Solange/index then.
No, because index is the default.
Interesting.
Below, behind. Okay.
So
let's think about this.
Okay.
What are we doing wrong? This is good though because we're doing
We're doing an experiment.
here, and in the process, we are learning how things work and doing things wrong. Right? We're going to do things together. So I've just changed that real quick. We did Fred before.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what it is.
Tell me.
All right. Check this out, friends. Let's go back and put it back to Solange. This is, okay, so here's index.
Yeah.
Look very carefully. There's only a couple lines.
Yes.
Here's Solange.
We did not put the page directive. Yay!
Okay. Interesting.
Interesting. So
It is that makes it magic.
Exactly.
That's when it runs. If it doesn't see the page directive, then it's never going to,
doesn't know where it needs to go.
doesn't know, it's not going to work that way. So that's interesting. Did not know that. Well, I knew it, but I didn't, I knew it intuitively.
But this is something that someone at home is going to encounter.
Yeah,
it's
it absolutely
definitely
is.
something that you're going to encounter. Like, we hit it, and it was the first thing I told you to do, was to add a page directive.
Yep, absolutely. And this actually brings up an interesting point about Visual Studio versus Visual Studio Code.
Yeah.
When we switch over to Visual Studio Code later, we're going to end up using the templates that are built in. So we're going to go and say, file new Razor page.
Exactly.
And we'll get some stuff for free. Because we're just making these text files by ourselves, we bump into these kind of mistakes. So that's really interesting. That does bring up the question about the folder thing, though.
Yeah.
Why don't we try that?
Okay.
Let's make a folder. Just call the folder that, and then we'll move this here.
Exactly.
And then change it to index, which appears to be the default.
So if you refresh the page.
Yep, same
Okay.
same experience. But if I change it here, so let's just explore this for a second. It looks like that is not necessarily the name of the file, but it's the path. So your default route would be path and then another path, in this case the default page right there, you see?
Yep. So the route is the file structure then.
The route is the file structure, which for a page-focused framework is a really nice experience.
It makes total sense for me.
Right.
Like when you build your first HTML page ever, it has the same experience. You have that page within a folder.
And that means that when we go later on and make customers and products and things like that, it's going to be really clear about how to do that. Now this is just static HTML,
Yeah.
though. We should probably add something dynamic before we move on to the next section. So let's give Solange some more information.
So I hear she has a concert today.
Okay, let's assume that it's always now. There's always a Solange
There's
concert
always a
at
Solange.
any moment.
Exactly.
So we'll have a boldface thing, and what should we say? The concert starts at, I don't know, 3 p.m., right? But I want to have that be dynamic.
Okay.
How can I make that now?
At date time.
So I say add again,
Yep.
date time, which is like system.datetime.
.now.
.now. All right, come back, hit refresh. Then hit refresh again.
I'm late. I gotta go.
You got to go. It's happening immediately.
It's happening right now.
Now, it's important to point out that notice the difference between me making a change,
Yep.
Control S, Alt Tab, refresh. I'm not having to build,
No.
right? With Razor pages, the page is being built when it changes and it gets hit for the very first time. If I change the C# files, I need to then go and rebuild.
Okay, but within the page itself, you do not need to do that. Okay.
So the Razor pages, these CS_HTML pages, they get copied to the host and they are part of the source code. But these .cs files don't get copied to the host. In fact, the DLL that they build into does.
Okay.
Right, and that's just a little important thing to point out. And you can see that if you go and say .NET build, we've been saying .NET run.
Yeah.
See? See how it actually points to your web app. It says my web app is right there.
So I have a question for you. If someone on this who's watching us right now is like, what is that DLL thing that he's talking about? Where can they learn more about that?
Right, so that's called an assembly. It's a dynamic link library.
Yeah.
If you want to learn about the details of how assemblies works and things like that, you can go and take a look at some of the intermediate sections in the docs.
Okay.
Okay? But I just wanted to point out that when I go and publish my application for the, like I'm meaning to say it's time for my app to go out into the world, we're going to get
and just to be clear for some people who are watching this, publish here doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to hit .NET Publish and somehow it's going to magically appear on the website.
Right.
Yeah.
I just mean that I need people to understand the difference between the source code that's in their C# files and the Razor pages that are going to be copied up to the final location. Cool. So this is a little bit of C# right here.
It is.
Right. I wonder if I could cheat.
How much do you want to cheat?
Well, like we can write C# here, right? Can I say 2 + 2? What am I allowed to say in there?
Broke it.
Right. So that got an error, right? So, you know, it doesn't like that. What are the rules about what you can put in there? We will kind of explore that a little bit later as we can say @ and then put chunks of code.
Okay.
All right. Cool. So that is dynamic. There's a concert starting immediately. And then we'll come back in a little bit and look at configuration.
All right.
Hey friends, we're going to talk a little bit about configuration, but before we do, briefly, I got an error before and I want to fix that.
Okay.
And it was kind of annoying. I was goofing around here, if you look at our Razor, and this is incorrect. I was being silly and goofing around. And when I was trying to do some math inside of my Razor page, because I'm experimenting, I kept getting this 500 error. This is the kind of error that you get in production.
Yeah.
And it's annoying and it's scary, but it's not really helpful to me, is it?
No.
Well, remember I'm running in production right now because we, over here in startup, we said if environment is development, show this developer exception page. You're going to show me later how to change from development to production. But I just wanted to briefly show that, of course, I can comment things out, just like before when we commented out starting a web app and instead changed it back to a console app. What I want to do is make sure that this developer exception page.
You want to see it, right?
I want to see it because I don't want a 500 error. I want a real error.
Okay, so
I want to know what's going on.
So by removing that line, you should be able to see the mistake.
Right. Now the right thing to do is to switch to development mode.
Okay.
But we're going to see that a little bit later. Okay. Now I'll go back here. I'm going to hit refresh. And now I'm getting a development page. You don't want to see this in production. But it's showing me that, well, this is not valid. This is not valid Razor. And it gives me the line of code. So now I actually know what's going on. And I'll go back over here.
Could you go back to your error page? If you hit on the plus button.
Okay.
Okay.
Give me a little context
of where it is on the page.
Because if it was thousands of lines, I might not know exactly where that was. Good point. Right? So instead of doing my 2 + 2 there, I'm going to say @ and I'm going to open up a little block here. And we'll just make a variable like I. I'll do my 2 + 2. And then I'll say I, PM.
Okay.
Make sense? So if I made a mistake in here, forgot to put the var,
it should get into an error.
It should say I does not exist and tell me the line, right? So it's compiling that Razor page the second that I hit refresh. All right.
Interesting. So
Good
it's also
reminder.
it is a good reminder.
So I'm just goofing around there. What we'll learn about a little bit later is how to set this environment so that it is in development, so I don't have to comment that line out.
So out of curiosity, this isn't something that people would want to do in practice, would they? Like by injecting bits of C# everywhere into their code?
Well, it depends. That's a good point. So we'll talk a little bit when we get a little farther on to the day about the responsibilities of a Razor page versus the responsibilities of the page model or the code behind.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. It is okay to do calculations in what's called the view if they are view-based calculations, if there's stuff that's not business logic. Like, for example, I don't think I would want to calculate tax rates and shopping cart values in here from a responsibilities perspective. But certainly I can chop up strings and do different kinds of stuff. So it is okay to inject little bits of C# in here.
Okay.
It's more about, is it going to be maintainable for the rest of the team? All right. Cool. So we talked earlier, you had me talk about the difference between configure services and configure.
Yeah.
I'm afraid we're going to insert another word that sounds like configure.
I know. It's just like it's configuration, configure it more, and configure it a little bit more.
That is software engineering, isn't it? It's mostly configuring things and running things.
Yep.
Okay,
and they all have around the same names. So yeah.
So this module's configuration. What are we configuring in this context?
So I want to show you how to add configuration into your application.
That means like switches, options, things that you would, configuration for your app.
Yes.
That is different from setting up your services.
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
So if you open up your, are we in startup? Yes, we are.
We are in startup. We called it Beyonce, which is probably going to confuse people.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah. Should we still call it Beyonce?
We should probably change it.
Just change it back to startup. Okay.
We don't want to lose our jobs. Startup. Okay, we're in the startup class.
Yes.
Cool. And we want to pull information out of a config file.
Yes,
right?
we do.
Where is the config file?
In iConfiguration.
No, but the name, the file itself, the settings for the application.
Oh, you actually have to add, you mean you add your app JSON? Is that what you're looking at?
Your app settings, right. So let's do that first.
So app settings.json.
That's the default
Yes.
name for settings for your app.
Exactly.
Now, I can put anything in here, right? As long as it's JSON, it's totally up to whatever configuration information I want, right?
Exactly.
So we'll have like some message.
Yeah, it can be like friendly call from Beehive or hello from
Here's
config.
some, here's a greeting.
From the config.
And your configuration, it really can be anything that is application specific. Any name value pair.
Exactly. So you could have logging over there as well, could you not?
Yeah, we'll see a little bit later. We'll have the logging levels. It can be, there'll be a place to put connection strings and all kinds of stuff. And we'll talk about the differences between where user secrets go, where connection strings go, and where non-secret things go.
So just for reference for people who are going to be watching this, like when I've been using the app settings, I've been using it mainly for configuration of my database.
Okay, so it depends on whether the configuration for your database is a secret.
It's a
Or not.
It should be a secret.
Yes,
It
you
should
probably
be a secret.
shouldn't put your
It should
connection
not
string
be
in there.
in there. Do not do this, although it's defaulted in the template. But as
We'll
someone
take a
who-
look at the template.
But as someone who has put apps into production, what are some of the most common things that you have actually used something like this for?
Let's say like maybe like someone's email address,
Okay.
for like, or I might have if I'm writing a blog, number of posts on home page,
Okay.
10, whatever. It
Yeah.
could be anything that is a quick little switch or change that you might want to pop into a config file and update.
Okay.
And what's nice about configuration is it's configurable. We're using JSON. It could be an INI file. It could be an XML file. It could be a database somewhere.
Yeah.
Any of the kinds of options that you want, show ads on homepage. I'm just thinking about things that I do on my blog,
Okay.
that kind of stuff.
Because I think people see it and they're just like, what is that about? And I think it's important for us to know.
Showing message is a silly kind of generic kind of a thing. But,
Yeah.
But
Like these are some real world examples.
like if you're having paging, page size, before I hit next, or whatever. So if I have 100 blog posts, maybe my page size is going to be 10. These are the kinds of things that you want to have in a config file somewhere that you can then pull out in your code. So we're going to figure out how to pull that out.
Okay.
All right. So let's go back to startup. And configuration is a service.
Yes, it is.
It's a thing, like logging is a service. You had MVC as a service. So we need to make sure that we can inject that service. That's a dependency that we're going to inject into our system. Okay, dependency injection, how much do you want to talk about that?
We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a different one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for now, we will just assume that we'll give you a little bit of background,
Yeah.
but we'll get deeper into it later. So I'm going to just make a constructor,
Yep.
right, my startup constructor here. And whatever parameters the startup constructor has will be given to me automatically by the system. They'll be injected directly into the system. So I need the ability to have an I configuration. And this is a little trick here. Let's watch this very careful. I'm going to type I configuration, and at the end of it, see how it's all squiggly?
Yeah.
I'm going to hit Control dot.
And it gives you the options.
And it says, well, do you want to make one of these? Or is it the one, do you mean this one here?
We mean that one there.
Right. And there's actually two options. You can add the using statement
Okay.
or fully
Yes.
fully express it, almost like a path, like C:\\, whatever. It's the
That would-
full path to I configuration.
That wouldn't make it available to the entire program.
And we'd have to do that every single time we
Yeah.
used it. Exactly. Good point. So we'll say using, and then watch up here on line 8. So watch at line 8. See?
Ta-da.
So
Yeah.
it just drops in there automatically. So startup, our startup class, is going to need I configuration, and we can call it whatever, call it config.
It can be.
And then we are going to store it away because they're going to pass it into us. They're going to make one. And this is important. We'll talk about dependency injection later. But the part that you need to remember is that you don't need to make one. You just ask for it. And by asking for it, we put it in as a parameter. So we don't actually go and say new whatever. So I'll say public I configuration, and we can name it configuration.
Yep.
And this is going to be a property.
Yep. So have a get and a set.
Get in a set. Excellent. And then we just squirrel it away, as they say. Configuration equals config. So they pass it in when we start up, and we stick it over here, which then presumably means I can use it, right?
Yes, you can. So you should be able to use it right from your page.
I can use it wherever. It
Yeah.
should be sitting around. So I could be down here. Oops. I was going to say this dot configuration dot, and then those are all the things that one can do. Now that's within my C# application, my C# code, my startup.cs. But if we go back over here, let's go to our index one, our Beyonce Razor page. You said I can use it from within here
Yes.
directly.
But we need to inject it first.
Okay, so just like it was injected in, it was made available. Inject is kind of an intense word.
I
that,
know.
I asked for it, and they gave it to me.
Yes.
I think inject is a little intense.
Please?
I don't know. So I'll say H2. Can I just go and say config? No. Can I say at config?
Yes, you can. Add configure, yeah.
But I can't because it hasn't been injected yet.
No, you actually have to have at inject configuration.
Okay. So up here where it says page,
Yeah, we need a new
we
directive.
need another directive. We need to go inject. Okay. And then when I say I configuration, though, it's not going to work.
Yeah, because we still need to inject the using statement.
We have to add the using statement. So using, and we'll make, and later on, we'll see how to do this for every page instead of having to do it on one page. But I'm going to say using. Then I'll say inject I configuration, and we'll just call it configuration. So this is asking for it.
Yes.
Okay. And then down here, I could say configuration, and we called it,
We call it a whole bunch of things.
let's say message.
Okay.
We'll grab message. Because it's just a bag of stuff. Oops. I can do it on multiple lines. I'll do it on one line. All right, let's see if that breaks. That's my positive attitude speaking.
Keeping it real.
Yep. Let's see if that breaks. That's the attitude of the developer. I think it'll be okay.
Breaking things is fun. Then you get to fix them, right?
That is true. So that's our Solange page. Let's look at our home page. Here you go. Here's a greeting from the config file. Let's go back and change that.
To another greeting?
Yep. Right, so that's coming out of that config file. We changed the config file, and the value changed. We did not change the code. All right, that's pretty cool. It's worth pointing out a couple of things, though. First, we have a using statement in our Razor page, just like we did over in our CS. I wonder, could I do this?
Should be a dot, right?
Right,
Okay.
yeah, thank you. So fully qualified path. Yes,
It worked.
It did not. Well, it worked in that it didn't break.
Okay, it worked.
Yeah, it worked in quotes. So that's interesting. I can back out of that. And then later on will see how we could make that configuration available everywhere.
Yes.
Because I don't want to have to keep adding.
Because otherwise you'd have to add it to every single page that you have.
Well, yeah, and I've got 3 lines of directives here, and I've only got 2 lines of HTML. So that's no fun.
No.
Okay, so I think we'll take a break, and then we'll graduate to Visual Studio proper.
Yes, we will.
Very cool.
Hi, and welcome back. We're going to have a look at Razor pages in this model. We had a look at it a bit before, where we introduced you to the concept of a page. And now we're going to have a look at it outside of Visual Studio Code and the command line. We're going to get started in Visual Studio.
Right, so we've been doing our stuff in Visual Studio Code. You can see here, we goofed around a little bit, and we made a couple of pages. You'll remember, though, that we started from an empty template.
Yeah.
So we went from nothing. We went from a Hello World console app into something with pages. I'm going to close Visual Studio Code, and I am going to go out here to Visual Studio proper, Visual Studio for Windows.
Yep.
You might be on Visual Studio for Mac, if you're on a Mac. And in this particular case, I'm going to be using Visual Studio 2017 Community.
Yeah.
You can go and get this at visualstudio.com.
For free.
For free. Works just nice. It's great. Visual Studio Community has a couple of small restrictions based on the size of your company. But if you're doing this as an open source person or as a person who's learning, Visual Studio Community is effectively pro. It's effectively the pro version. It lets you have extensions. It's a great little tool. All right. So what I'm going to do is, you can see, just to familiarize yourself with the UI here, I've got some recents and things. I've got new project. You can say create new project. On the left-hand side, you may see different stuff depending on what you installed. When I ran the installer for Visual Studio, I set up for the web workload. It's called the workload. You might have Android, you might not, but you want to make sure that you have the .NET Core web workload.
And quick question, you mentioned the Visual Studio installer. That does come when you download Visual Studio.
Yeah, so when you install it, good point, let me bring that up. When you install it, you're going to get this application. This is Visual Studio installers coming up here. One moment. And the installer is modular. Okay, so it'll come up like this. And if I say modify, you can run the installer multiple times. You can run the installer after you've installed Visual Studio if you wanted to add other stuff. Oh, see, look, even the installer itself wants to update. So right now, just coincidentally, the installer has new stuff that it wants to give me, so it's going to go in and update itself. While it's doing that, you download this thing called a bootstrapper. It's a tiny little installer that goes and gets the things that you want. Visual Studio could be quite large if you installed everything, or it could install in 20 minutes if you just wanted to do web apps or you just wanted to do Windows apps.
So this allows you to customize your install.
Exactly, and the things that you customize them with are called workloads. So like the cloud workload or the mobile device workload. So here, there you go, it just updated itself. You can see that I have, at the time of this recording, Visual Studio Community 15.4. You should make sure that you have at least that or higher. If I click on Modify, it's going to go and give me some more choices. And I'm doing this, of course, after the fact. I picked Universal Windows, I picked .NET Desktop, I picked ASP.NET.
But you can see so many other options. You have Python, Node, data science.
And I could add these things afterwards. So if I wanted to do Linux development in C++, I would click that, and it'll go and update and tell me, right now it's thinking about how much more it needs to download in order to get me that stuff. And then from within that, you can go into individual components and pick on the specific things that you want, right? So you see I've selected F# as well. This can be run multiple times, and I just wanted to point out that I ran it and installed the web workload. So installing the web workload, when I went File, New Project, is what gives me this choice here for saying web pages. So Visual C#, web pages. I've got the ASP.NET Web Applications using the .NET framework, the full framework that comes with Windows, or ASP.NET Core Web Apps, which work on, of course, Linux and Mac and Windows, which is what we're doing today. All right?
All right.
Good stuff. So I'm going to double-click on that. I've said File, New Project. And it's going to pop up a dialog here. You're going to want to double-check this drop-down. You might have it default to like Core 1.0 or 1.1. You're going to want to be 2.0 or higher. You'll notice that the icons change based on what you pick. I can make Angular apps or React.js apps. I can make full model view controller applications. We're just going to say web app, which is the default.
Okay.
This gives us both Razor pages that we're doing today, and of course Razor pages are a part of or built on top of model view controller.
Okay.
So it's really the best choice for everybody, the most recent project template. And if you were doing that from the command line, do you remember what the command was for that?
Razor.
.NET New
Razor.
Razor, exactly. Okay, so I'll double click on that. And when we create that, we're going to watch the right-hand side over here where it says Solution Explorer. This will get you the same output as if you had said .NET New Razor. This is important, that .NET New Web or .NET New MVC.
It's the same experience.
It's the same experience. You don't want to have a different experience for Visual Studio Code people than you do for Visual Studio proper people.
So the templating does match, because before you had to use a bit of Yeoman over in one place.
Right. All the templating is matched and is nice and clean. There's a little helper page that shows up there, but we're going to zoom in over here and see how Visual Studio for Windows expresses itself. You can see we've got a couple more pages than before. We've got an About page and a Contact page. And where would those paths be, given what we learned about Razor paths?
/about, /contact, /error, oh, index would be default.
Index would be default, exactly, right? Now, interestingly, these have something underneath them.
Yeah.
So these are the code behinds or the page models. That's the page, and that's the page model, and they've nested those. This is an important little thing to point out. Let's look at this in Windows Explorer, just to make sure. If I say open in Windows Explorer,
They should appear as two separate files?
they are two separate files. So here's index and index CSHTML. They are clearly two separate files. But it's kind of convenient, and it gives you a sense of the relationship between the files that the Solution Explorer in Visual Studio will go and nest them.
So could you think about it as the car and then the engine?
Yeah, you could do that. Anything that is any kind of hierarchy.
Yeah.
And then beneath that .cs, it gets even more interesting. It turns into a class explorer.
Okay.
These are not files, of course. That's a property and that's a method. But now we're kind of blurring the lines, and now you're really looking at conceptual bits of things. And as you make changes, those will update. So that gives you, that's something that you see in Visual Studio that you don't see in Visual Studio Code. I can do that with all of my C# classes. So remember before, start up and configure services and all that?
Yeah.
Same kind of deal. Also, things like our app settings JSON, which we used earlier in the previous module for configuration. If there is something that has like an environment, like app settings.production.json or app settings.json, that's something we didn't yet talk about.
No.
Remember before when I did that, I commented that line out so that I could see the
exception page.
Where was that? Do you remember where that was?
Yeah, so I believe it was in your startup.
There it is.
Yeah.
So here's use developer exception page. And if you recall, it was, if you're in development, do that. Every time we ran the thing, it kept saying we were in production.
Yes.
I grew frustrated, and I just went like that, which got me past that problem, but isn't correct. Okay? We'll go and right-click Properties. And is it Build or is it Debug?
Go to
Debug.
there we go, and then you add it.
Yep. So the environment variable, ASP.NET Core _ environment equals development, is the thing that makes the difference. So tying that back to configuration, you can have different configuration options. You can have app settings dot whatever, and whatever, literally whatever, like foo,
Anything.
testing, staging,
Okay.
right? Whatever makes you happy. So in this case here, one app settings JSON has some stuff in it. Looks like it's got, oops, wrong button. Some logging that we'll learn about a little later. And then development, look at the difference between the two. One is set for warnings and one is set for debug.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, right? So a little bit of information there. So more sophisticated than what we had originally set up. Let's return over to startup and see what else is different. So we've got that configuration that we did before. We've got services.add MVC. Here's an exception handler. This is an interesting little bit of code right here. So if we're in development, show the exception page that I like as a developer. Or if you're in production, or really anything but development, we're just going to show the error. That way we don't give away our source code and
Okay.
show people stuff. Now you had me use MVC before.
Yes.
This one has a little bit more information with different routes. We'll talk about that another time. And then we've also got static files in case you wanted to pick up a file. Remember that couple of times we tried to pick up a file and it was skipping right past it because we didn't put the at page?
Yes.
It would have served that file if it found it on disk if we had said static files.
So if we had added that line of code into the previous experiment, it would have just worked.
It wouldn't have worked. It would have picked the file up and served it to us. But it would have picked it up as a static file.
And not in what it intended. Okay.
And not as a razor page and actually executed the code. So the order of these things matter, and also whether or not you want to run that or pick it up as a static file, like a GIF or an HTML page. All right? So that's a little bit of a tour. Am I missing anything? I think that sounds
No,
good.
That's good.
Actually, one other point. Underneath www root, that's where your static things go. We've got our images there and our CSS. The pages, the static things are served out of root. And then the pages for our Razor Pages app are located in pages. But when I want to have an image, like /images/something, it's served out of www root.
So there's one thing that's new, is the view imports, layouts.
Ah, good point. So remember when we were goofing around earlier, and over here we had our page, and we had inject, and that wasn't enough, and then we needed an at using, and then suddenly we had more directives than we had code.
Yeah.
That was a little weird. Well, you can do a thing called view imports, which is all of the things that you want every page to have, right? So we want every page to use this namespace, and every other one to, this is using a namespace, and this is the namespace of those pages themselves. There's also a thing called tag helpers that we'll talk about in the intermediate day.
Yes, we will.
And then view start is a piece of code, multiple lines, as many as you like, that runs for every view.
Okay.
All right, so if every view needed to check someone's name or check for cookies or whatever, like it depends how you want to do things. But these are the imports, all the different injects, all the different usings, and this is the little bit of code you want. In this case here, it's setting a layout. That's like the main page that every other page wraps around. So here, layout.cshtml is a Razor page that has the top level HTML, it has the head, it has the CSS,
Probably has a footer somewhere.
Yep, footer's
Okay.
down here. There's some Bootstrap and some different JavaScript. And then the Your Razor page is called the body.
And it's rendered right there.
It's rendered right there. So this is a good point, actually. Let me do this. Begin body and body. Okay,
Okay.
let's run this. So this one is a little bit bigger, of course, than our previous application, so it might take a moment to fire up.
Okay. And if
Begin
you go to
body.
another one of the pages, let's say the home
And
page.
body, good point. This is the home page. Let's go to About.
Yeah, it should be on. Okay.
Okay, so that's everything that's outside. Then this bit here would be
Everything coming from the page.
right here.
Yeah.
So start my page, end my page. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So I'm just undoing all of that. Little Control Z. And we will come back in a moment and try to build something
Yeah.
that is non-trivial.
Exactly.
And we'll probably make a couple mistakes.
And it happens.
And hopefully we will learn. And we appreciate you learning with us.
Thank you.
Hey friends, we're glad you're still with us here on Microsoft Virtual Academy as we do our intro to ASP.NET Core. We're learning all about Razor Pages and our application. This module will be a little longer,
Yes, it will.
and it will probably have us making some mistakes together, and that's okay. And we're going to try not to hide anything from you.
Yeah.
We are following the documentation, as we hope you are, and maybe you can follow along, pause, try stuff out, and maybe Google with Bing
Google
if you have trouble and get stuck.
Yeah, and we'll have links to the documentation right underneath this recording.
All right, so we're going to try to make a CRUD
Yeah.
page. What is CRUD?
Create, up. No, sorry. Create, read, update, delete.
All right. So a CRUD application maps verbs from CRUD
Yeah.
into verbs that we're used to using, like a get is a get, so that'd be like a read.
Yeah.
And if you're going to create something, it'd be a post. So you'd fill out a form, you'd hit submit, and it would post the data. That's a create.
Yeah.
Then you can maybe read it back and look at an edit page, or then maybe delete it. So if
Yeah.
we succeed, we'll have a simple form, maybe create some customers, put them in a fake database,
Yep.
and we'll be okay.
Yep. And we'll be learning more about databases in the intermediate course as well.
Yes, we'll have a whole section on databases. So for now, we're going to be doing it in an in-memory database.
Yes.
Okay, so let's do the best we can. We're going to use the same web application one that we created before. We saw in the previous modules where we added MVC, but of course all of that stuff was added for us because we went File New Project.
Yes.
And we picked Web Application. All right? So here in Configure Services, we've got Add MVC, but we're going to make our little in-memory database here. We're going to say services.add DB context, or add database
Yeah.
context.
And give it a name.
And we're going to create a thing called the app DB context. We can name it whatever we want to. We haven't written this yet, but we will. I'm going to hit Control dot, and it's saying, hey, do you need an app DB context? Do you want to go and generate one of those? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. So it's gone and done that, and we'll deal with that in a minute. Again, I will very likely make mistakes, so you'll bear with me, I hope. I opened up the parentheses there, and I'm going to pass in some options. And the options I'm going to pass in for my database context are going to see options dot
Use memory.
use
In.
memory database.
Yes. But the reason why that's not showing that perfect, we
So
need
why
to
is that
add.
not showing up?
So we need to add the entity framework. So we need to use.
I probably should have added that first, and I would have gotten IntelliSense.
True.
Let's try that. If we go back up to the top, so we add Entity Framework Core beforehand.
Yep.
Look, you see that little arrow there that's pointing down?
Yeah.
That means that this method was included by the fact that we just did that using.
Okay.
That's called an extension method. It's along for the ride. And it actually says extension. That wasn't there seconds ago.
No,
was
it wasn't.
Yeah. Add in-memory database, some name.
Yeah.
All right. And then we look at the squiggle and we worry, does the squiggle mean something? So here it's saying AppDB context. Well, we never really went and did anything with that AppDB context.
No.
Let's go over there and fix that. I'm going to right-click and say go to definition. And let's work on our database context. This is kind of standard stuff, so don't worry about it too much. But basically, this is representing the database. I'm hitting Control Dot there. And I'll say make it an AppDB context. This is a constructor, right?
Yep.
Okay. And we're going to take in some options. Context options. Oops. Optunes.
Yeah. Options.
Options. Pass up to the base class those options. I'm going to put that. When I'm trying to zoom and make it helpful for you, I end up making it worse for myself.
Well, at least you have other people in mind.
I do. And then
I'm
we're
presuming you have to set it of some sort.
We're going to have a set of, what do you say, customers?
Yes.
So we have a set of customer. Customer does not exist yet. That's why it's squiggled out. And then we do the getter setter.
Yeah.
Get set. Okay. Customer is squiggled out. The type or namespace customer could not be found. Well, that's true because we haven't made one yet.
No.
We've not made it up. I could type Control Dot, but I'm going to click Show Potential Fixes. This is kind of interesting. Here it's saying, well, I could go and make a customer for you.
Yeah.
But look at this here. It's suggesting other packages that have the word customer, the name customer in it. So these are other NuGet packages, packages up in the world. Yeah, isn't that cool?
That's pretty cool. But there is
so
a package out there that has
the word customer.
in
Now,
it.
I don't want those. But if I was doing something with JSON or doing something with some, some technology that I knew I would need the NuGet package later, it would go get it for me. So I'm going to say generate in new file. That seems reasonable.
It does.
All right. So I just generated that. Now notice it just appeared.
There it is.
And now I'm going to right-click and say go to definition. It is worth pointing out that I could also right-click and say peak definition.
And could you write in there?
I could. I think that would be a little weird.
But
But then I can click on this little tab right here, promote to document, and now I've jumped into that document. So I can peek, and then if I type a little bit, and it's like, this is tiresome, and I could jump even higher out.
that's pretty smooth.
It is pretty smooth. All right, I'll show you another smooth tip.
Oh, I know it.
Yeah, you want to suggest, please?
What, the tab thing?
Yes, ready?
Okay.
Prop,
Tab.
tab,
Yep.
int, tab, ID, enter, prop, tab, string, enter, tab, name, right? How cool is that?
It's cool, and I always forget to use it.
You got to use it.
I always
There's
forget
so
to
much
use it,
good
and
stuff
it's
in here.
awesome. So
There's also prop full.
Ooh. What does that do?
That gives you a backing variable. There's prop A, which I don't know what it does, but it's crazy. There's there's prop G for a getter with a private setter.
Okay.
Yeah, a bunch of stuff. It's great.
Have you done a blog post on all the property?
There's a bunch of snippets. I could go all day,
Okay.
but I'm just going to use prop for now.
Okay.
So this is customers. So customers have an ID, a unique ID, and they have a name.
And they could probably have an email. They could have all these things. Yeah.
We'll start with name for now, but should name have some constraints?
It should. And we have the idea of data annotation.
There's
So
annotation on that data, yes.
So one of the things is that you probably want someone to enter their name, right?
We want to force them, really.
We want to force them. So we want to make sure it's some sort of required, right?
So required, and I'm putting it as an annotation here, and I'm going to hit Control Dot again. When you learn that these things exist and you're thinking about them, rather than typing in all this stuff for the using, you're just going to type required.
Yeah.
Hit Control Dot and then hit Enter. Line 1 just appeared there. And then we'll force the length as well. Let's say a length of, we'll be silly for a moment, we'll say a length of 10.
Okay.
That's not a very good length,
That is not a good length to go.
but that might allow us to do some validation later.
Okay.
And then we'll change it to a longer length. All right, so let's back up for a second and see what we did here. So we have in our startup an in-memory database,
Yeah.
not a SQL Server or a whatever, just an in-memory database. We have a beginnings of a customer, unique ID and a name, some annotations on it, and then a little class here that's kind of empty that is our list of customer. And actually where it says customer singular here,
Yeah.
that should be customers.
Okay, because
Yeah, this
you have
is
a
set of customers. All right.
So the one thing, how are we going to see this information?
Well, we're going to need to probably put some in the database, and then once we have them in the database, list them out.
Oh, I mean, like, how are we going to visually see it? We have to have some.
So there's a bit of a chicken and the egg problem there. Like, do we make the listing page first and list them out? But we really can't because we don't have any.
You don't have anything, yeah.
Or we make a create page first. So it's CRUD.
Yeah.
We'll do the C first. Okay. So over in
The pages folder?
pages, let's do create. Now, we're not going to say new file like we did before.
No, you're going to create a new Razor page, or if you go to new file.
Oh, let me do that
Sorry.
again.
Okay.
Right click,
Add.
add. So I get two choices. I have new
And then-
Razor page, or I can say item.
Yeah, new item. And they should be the option to pick Razor page.
Right, so you've got a couple different options here. And this is all the different things that you could make. I'm going to go and right click and say add Razor page.
Yeah.
And I'm going to point out that I'm not going to do it for this because it'd be a little bit cheating. But after we're all done,
Yeah.
first we make you suffer.
And then we show you the
Let me
easy.
show you the easy way. We could create that model and then say Razor pages using Entity Framework CRUD, and it would then scaffold or generate
Every single.
all the hard parts that we're about to do. But it's
Can we
more
just
fun
do
to do
that?
it. No, it's more fun to do it ourselves. Don't you think?
All right.
All right, let's
All
do it
right.
ourselves.
Yeah.
People can fast forward if they don't like it.
So the page name would be create.
And then we're going to use a layout.
Exactly.
Right? We saw that. And then here it says generate page model. That's that code behind it, that page model. We could say no and then do that inline if we wanted to. All right, so let's see if that works. So it's thinking. We're going to watch on the right-hand side here as create should appear.
And it's taking a while because it's doing quite a bit of scaffolding
Well,
for
it's
you, right?
scaffolding out some work for us, but it's also going to build the application to see if it still builds. And if it's running a scaffolder, and scaffolder is just something that you can go and read about and write your own if you feel like it. So here we got to create.
So let's see what we have in there.
Let's see, it gave us a page. It gave us a default model,
Okay.
a title, looks like a header, and then some validation scripts, and then presumably we can just start typing our pages or
Okay.
whatever. Okay. Let's look at the back end. It made a create model that has a get. So this is the function that happens when we get stuff.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to need to make a form. Cool.
All right. So a form that would have actually just one entry.
Yep. So we'll say enter your name figure. All right.
Yeah.
And who knows if this will work. Again, we're going to learn. Now, this is interesting. Notice that when I type form,
Where is it in purple?
it turns purple. So that is a tag helper. This is some related elements that are going to be on the server for processing. So the server knows about purple
Yeah.
elements and will do some processing of them. Typically, when you're in HTML, you have like a p tag or an image tag
Yeah.
or a div. And that's just strings that get sent off to the client. But when we're generating this stuff on the server side, there might be an opportunity for ASP.NET Core to improve it, to change it,
Okay.
to add stuff. So it knows about form. Form is a magic tag. And we can go and type things like this. You see it says ASP colon.
Yeah. So is that indication of that is a tag helper with some sort of
Right.
action?
These things aren't HTML.
Yeah.
Those are tag helpers. You'll never see ASP hyphen something being sent all the way out to the browser. These are not HTML. They're
if-
hints to the server.
So if when we run this application and we go into the F12 tools, we will not see.
You shouldn't see those.
Okay.
Exactly. So we're going to say form. This is going to be basic. Method equals a, see, get,
Okay.
post, put, delete. We'll say post. So we're going to go and post. Here's the end of our form. Say div, name, and then we'll need a text box.
Yeah. So some sort of input tag.
Yep, input. Now this is interesting. We could do an input tag the way we usually do, or we could say ASP.NET for,
Okay.
and we're going to say customer.name.
Okay.
See how it's all purple? That ASP4 is going to look at that model. Okay? Now it's saying here, I don't know what a customer is. What's going on with that? It's never heard of customer before. We'll come back and fix that in a second.
Okay.
Then we'll have an input for submitting that form. Okay? But we have a problem here where it doesn't know what customer is. What is the model for this page? Right? It's the create model. So let's go look at that.
Peek into definition? Okay.
I want to point out how I'm moving around. I'm right-clicking and saying go to definition. There's also a hotkey for that. So this is an important reminder just as a programmer. You don't want to necessarily find yourself going over and looking around all the files all the time. You can navigate
to it, right?
to it directly. You can navigate logically, as they say. Okay? All right.
Did you cut something out from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Create.
There we go.
Oh, yeah, I cut out create model. Thank you. All right. So our create model is going to need to know about customers because that's going to show up on the page. So public customer, that's a type. That's a name. You can tell by their color. It's a little confusing, but the property is called customer and the type is called customer. Okay. And this is going to need that database context. So we're going to make a little database here.
And this is a good, just being the voice of the person who's watching this at home. Why have you made it private read-only?
So that's a great point. So I don't want people who get a hold of create model to be poking around and talking directly to the database. So it's going to be private, just for me, where me is create model. And it's read-only, which means I'm going to assign it once, and I don't want anyone to touch it after that.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm making it just for me, and I'm making sure I can't mess with it afterwards. Excellent, excellent question. So then we'll make our
create model,
our constructor. And remember how dependency injection works. We don't make an AppDB context. We ask for one. We ask for it by putting it in our constructor. And we can have as many of these as we want. We can have foo and bar and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is the one we want for now.
Okay.
And then I'm just going to say, hey, this one equals that one. I'm going to squirrel it away and hang on to it. So now I've got one. Okay? So that says there's this database and I want to know about it. This says there's a customer. If I go back over to create, I can hover over that and see it's getting me probably IntelliSense too. Yep, see?
Yeah, it is.
So it knows about customer because it's hanging off of the model.
So as we're running the application, technically, I should be able to go to this page, hover over customer name, and see what names we put in there?
You should be able to click on that. You should be able to have IntelliSense.
Yep.
If you did a breakpoint, you should be able to stop in here at some point and look at that, and we'll do that in a little bit. What we need to, though, is we need to bind this form. We're saying this input for customer name. When I hit submit, we need to catch it on the server side.
I call it surviving the journey.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. It does need to survive the journey. So I'm going to get rid of this on get here. So we're going to do a post. You can say on post. You could do it like this, but the right way to do it is like this.
Async?
Async, which means don't block. And we're going to have a task that returns some action. We're going to, we might be doing something after this, and I'm going to say on post async. And it's giving me a little complaint here saying, you didn't do a wait, and you haven't returned a value. Code paths, not all code paths return a value.
Okay.
That's because we haven't done anything yet. So when someone posts back, they hit submit, and it posts back to here, we would really like customer to have stuff in it.
Yes.
And so there's a couple things here. And then we need to make sure that the state of that model is valid. That someone hasn't messed with it. So I'm going to say if model state is valid, or if it's not, pardon me.
I was about to say something.
I appreciate that. Then return the page back to itself to say, oh, no, I'm done. If I hover over page, you can see it returns a page result, which is a kind of action. Returning a page is an action. If we get that this far, now I'm going to say DB. Remember when I say DB?
Yes.
What is DB? It is a application DB context.
Yep.
In there is customers, plural.
And we want to add one.
.add. We'll pass in the customer that we just got handed.
Okay.
And then we'll say, hang out for a minute, await, and we'll say DB save changes. And async means don't wait. Then we will go and return, not a page, because we're on the create page. We really want to return to the list.
Yep. So you're doing a redirect?
We're going to do a redirect, exactly. And we haven't actually got a place to go yet, but we'll say redirect to page.
Okay.
And you can see that there's options like redirect to page permanent, which would be a 301, an HTTP 301. We're going to do a 302 because this is just a standard kind of redirect. We'll just say /index. And I think we should probably just say like /, but we'll see what happens.
If people wanted to learn more about 301s, 302s, do you have any recommendations?
The internet.
Correct.
Yes, I would search around for that kind of stuff. Ultimately, look at the docs.
Yeah.
But like redirect to page is a standard thing, and again, if you hover over it, it says right there, status 302 found. But if I said redirect to page permanent,
We'll change it.
change it to a 301,
Okay.
which would tell the search engine, don't ever come back here and ask me about this again. Don't ever talk to me again. Go here.
All right.
That's what that means. I'm paranoid, so anyway, you never want to do that when you're doing database work. You always want to be temporary. Okay?
Okay.
All right. And if you really, really, really want to like upset your coworkers, you could move your curly braces
Yeah.
and do stuff like this. And if you really want to be possibly buggy, you could even do stuff like this, where that's all one line.
Yeah.
But you might have other stuff
That
you
you need
want
to
to
add.
do.
Okay.
Some people that really bothers them, some people it doesn't. For me,
Does it bother you?
I kind of like it on one line if it's not that big of a deal. You know what I mean? Because it's just, but as soon as you have an extra line, then you're going to go and undo it and take it apart.
Yeah. So it's not.
It's
not really
stylistic.
but it's not really a best practice for someone to know right now.
No, for right now, I just think it's nice to have everything fit on one line like that. But using the curly mustaches is curly braces. They look like a mustache if you turn your head. That's a best practice.
It still gets into when people say curly braces, and I don't know what they're talking about because
What
I
do you
use
call them?
brackets.
You call them brackets?
So you have brackets, curly brackets, square brackets. So
Oh, scandalous. Okay.
you mean fancy.
That is pretty intense.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm going to put a breakpoint here.
Okay.
And we'll see if this works.
All right.
It might very well not work.
Fingers crossed and toes.
No, it's probably not going to work. Lower your expectations now. All right.
Okay.
This is in create, right? So I have to hit /create.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Did we bind it?
Yeah. See what's happening? Nothing.
No.
Now if we go and do a view source,
And you go to. Okay.
I just want to show the people the form first. Some things showed up on the input. That's kind of cool. That's kind of nice.
That is.
We didn't type that, right? Remember? So we're getting stuff on the input that we did not expect, which is
And then
cool.
there's some request
Yeah, the
verification.
request verification token to keep people from tampering with our stuff. There's your name, customer.name, and it generated an ID for us as well. But you can see that nothing's happening. On customer, Actually, I'm going to put a breakpoint a little higher up, and then I'll explain to you what's going on.
Okay.
Let's see if we can even get to the post. Okay. Do a debug session again, /create. So I would have expected
To hit that breakpoint.
to hit that breakpoint. So that's concerning. But I know that I need to say bind property on the customer, which is to tell it I want this customer object filled out with the form information, right?
Yeah.
And right now I don't have that. So let's take a look and try this again. The customer is going to get created and filled up with information bound to those form fields. If that doesn't work, then I've forgotten something, and we will go and have a little debugging, which will be fun as well. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So let's take a look. It's probably something obvious. So we've got a form, we've got our input, we've got our method. I said post. Does it matter if it's all caps? That would be odd if it did.
So it doesn't matter.
The tag helper exists already in view imports. The form is there. The only thing I didn't add is the validation summary. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so I'm putting in a long name, Fancy Pants, and nothing's happening.
No.
No? And I'm realizing that I've got my form with my input for customer name, but I put my validation summary outside the form.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to put it inside the form because it's validating the form. And then I'm going to hit refresh. Fancy Pants. See? And it says the field name must be a string with maximum length 10. I'm getting that validation for free, right? And where did that 10 come from?
We set it in, yep, right there.
Set it right there. So maybe we'll change that to like 25 or something.
Some people have really long names. Like in my country, people have names that are 50 and 50. So maybe 100.
I'll make 49, and then that 150 person, they're going to suffer.
Oh, man.
But the point is, it's driven by that, okay? And then one other thing.
So it would be the same if someone entered something that wasn't an email, right?
Yeah, it could be an email. It could be, you could put in validation information however you want, and you could even put in custom regular expressions, or even write your own custom validators. So they can be as sophisticated as you want.
Okay.
You could also, I believe, say I want a span and say ASP validation for, and you could go and do field by field validation. Okay? So here I'm saying this is my summary of all the different things. This is a specific validation for customer name. Okay, let's see what that looks like. That might look a little different. So I'm going to come over here, come back over here and hit refresh. Oops, I actually don't hit refresh. I need to run my app again because I stopped it. Okay. I'll run that again. Go to create. I think we made it really long this time, right? And I tab away, and it says it must be a string with a maximum length of 49.
Okay.
Okay. But I like the main validation stuff, so we'll leave that like that. Okay? Now, let's go back to our breakpoints and run our debug this time and see if we can see the customer get bound.
Okay.
And we had looked in the F12 developer tools before. We could see what's happening on the wire. This is a good way to kind of just see what's happening as you do your posts.
So were you looking, so you went to developer tools
Yep, I went
and
to
then
dot,
network?
dot, dot, developer tools, and we're under network.
Okay.
I will go and probably clear it out, and then we'll put in Maria. Okay.
Yep. There we go. So if
All
you
right.
hover over that.
So we hover over customer. See? Because it's there, because customer has a name,
Yeah.
customer.name, and we named the field customer.name, and we told it, hey, bind, we want you to participate. You automatically showed up in there.
Okay.
And I can put a little pin there as well. If I was going to do lots of debugging sessions, and I can keep you there as a post-it note and watch customer name change over time. Yeah.
That's a good one.
We can go and see if the model state is valid. It is.
What is the green button? Oh, that's a play. Like, okay.
Yeah, go to that point. Play up to that point, and then stop. So here, I'm going to go and add that customer to the database, save it to the database, which of course is an in-memory database. And then we'll redirect. Now, we had put in /, but I'm not sure if that's going to work.
Should we see what
Let's
the error
find
page
out.
is, just in case?
Yeah, see?
Okay.
It says no page / matches this value.
So you have to give the
I need to
specific
say
name.
index, which was what our main page is here. So index. Okay. Now we'll confirm that that works. I can hit F5 to go and debug, or I can hit Control F5, which I like to do because it starts up a little faster if I know that I'm not going to do a debugging session.
But this time you hit F5?
I hit Control F5 to go faster. Okay, so it redirected me to index, but of course I haven't done anything on index that's interesting yet.
Okay.
That'll be the next part, right?
So you could also probably send a message saying,
I could say customer updated or whatever. But let's rip out this whole section here
okay, you're going to
and put a list of contacts.
Okay.
Is that cool? So where's our index? So this is all this carousel and all this stuff.
All the fancy bootstrap.
I'm going to actually go like this.
And then you comment it out?
Actually, no, I'm just going to be awesome and just like toss it.
Wow.
Yeah. But this is a way, if you want to go hunting for the other side of the div, you can just fold these up. See that this matches this. Fold it up, select over it, and toss it. Cool. All right. So let's make our form. And this will be on the index page, right?
Yep.
We'll have method equals post. And this will be a table.
All right.
It's okay to use tables if it is a table of data. Let's see, so many people complain about tables being a bad idea, you know. I think that's kind of funny. It's a table. It's okay to have a table. So we'll have a head for our table, and we'll have our ID row.
Yep.
Oops. And we'll have
Right.
ID, and we'll have name. We don't really need to show the database ID, but for now, we'll just show it.
All right.
That cool?
So do you have to create a Toya Bibo? Okay, yeah. You're way ahead of me.
No, it's okay. Table body. But now I need a row for each.
So would you put it in the row, or would you? So I'm presuming that you'd need to go for every contact within.
Exactly. So I'm going to have like a for something here,
Yeah.
then a couple of cells, table cells, and then maybe a I don't know, like a link to edit and like a delete button.
Yeah.
Okay. You see how I'm kind of sketching it out.
You're sketching it out.
Okay.
What's it called? Pseudocode? is that?
Pseudocode. It's
Yeah.
a little pseudocode here. So now I'm going to say at,
Or for each. Yeah.
and this is a snippet.
Yeah.
Tab, and then I'm going to say for each contact in what? In
model.
Now, where's our customers? Okay? So remember before, when we were doing our create model, we needed to have the customers come from somewhere.
Yes.
Now we're in a totally different page.
Oh, yeah, so we have to have the customers too.
We're going to have the customers, right? So I'm going to just take a break here, and I'm going to jump over to the index model, because we can't really make our table till we have a little bit more. Okay? And I'm going to break a couple of cardinal rules, and I'm going to copy-paste a little code, because I'm going to need this similar app database, this app DB context. So I'm just going to save myself a moment of time here. So we've got our app context, right? We're going to have our index page model. Now before, when we create a customer, we create one customer.
Yeah.
But here, our model is different, because we're going to have a list of customers on this page, right? So our model is different. And we'll do a get and then a private set so that only we can set it.
Okay.
All right? And then in the onGet, we'll say onGet.
One line below. Did you? On get sync? Okay.
onGet async, right? We're going to load up customers. Where do we get them from? The database.
Please. Okay.
And this is right there. We get them out of customers. And then there's this other little bit of thing that you can add on to make things a little bit faster. You can say as no tracking. And I'll show you what that means in a second. And we're going to turn these customers into a list of customers. So we're chaining things together. We're saying, give me these customers, and we're not going to keep track of them changing. You see, it says disabling change tracking is useful for read-only scenarios. Change tracking is watching, like keeping a track of all the different things you could change,
Yeah.
so that you know how to make a database update. So if I had a list of customers and I wanted to watch all of them and change their names, that would give the database system, entity framework that we're going to learn about later, all the information it needs about how to only change the bits that change, how to only change the database. But we're just getting a list. So we're going to say, don't track these, just give me a list.
Okay.
So customers, no tracking, give me a list. So that's cool. And I think we'll leave that like that for now. We'll go back over to index. And now that model, the page behind us, has customers. Look, customer shows up, see?
Yeah.
Which is nice. So then I think I can put my TR in here. And I'm hoping, remember it says, oh, I said contact. I should say customer. Customer singular. For each customer, that means that the customer variable is now available to me. Customer dot, see?
Mm-hmm. Everything's connected.
Yep. Cool. Let's try that.
Okay.
And then we'll do the rest, because I don't know if this is going to work yet. Now, I'm using an in-memory database, so every time I run this, it's going to go away.
So it's just throwaway database, yeah.
I need to do better. I need to, maybe make tests later. And
I survived the journey.
you did. Let's see. But as soon as I shut you down, it's going to be gone.
So if you refresh the page?
No, you're here. You're still there, right? You're there. You're there until I close it. Until I close this browser, or not until I close the browser. Pardon me. Until I stop the web server.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. Cool. So now we've got create. We should probably put a button down there at the bottom somewhere. We've got some validation. We've got our database. We can add our friends. And this is doing a thing called post redirect get. So I'm here, I hit a post, we do a redirect, and then we do a get, and then we would get this stuff here. So this is a PRG, post redirect get. There's lots of articles on the internet about that. Now let's make a link to theoretically go and edit these things.
Okay.
And then we'll have a button for delete. These things don't exist on the back end yet.
So yeah, so we don't have an edit page yet.
We don't.
So, okay.
We can make a link. Now I could go and put in a link, href, you've done this before
Yep.
a million times, and say /edit, and then like put in strings and stuff, but remember we talked about how great tag helpers are.
Yeah.
What if we went and said ASP page, and then we could go and say there was an edit page, and then it would figure out what the URL would look like.
Okay.
All right? And then it could even express the route a certain way. And we'll talk about routes in a minute. Route, I think it's route ID. And I think we called it customer ID. So it's going to take that customer's ID. So we want to basically make a page that looks like /edit/2, /edit/3, all right? And that's the route ID that's going to get added on to that.
Okay.
Okay?
So the next thing you had was a button.
Yeah, we'll do a button. Type equals submit. And this is going to be handled by the page.
Okay.
Button's going to be a little different. The reason that we're doing a button in an href is so that you can see the difference between a link and how links behave and buttons. Like a link is going to navigate somewhere,
Yeah.
and a button is going to cause a post, right? So this will go and be handled by the delete handler. But we also need that route information. We need that ID because we're going to delete a particular
So you need
customer.
the content ID. Yeah.
Customer ID, exactly. All right. And then none of this is hooked up.
So you mentioned something, voice of the people at home, about the button being a post.
Yes. It is going to post back, and then we're going to need to handle that behavior differently than the create page. So there I just put a link at the bottom there for create. So I'm just going to hit refresh.
So let's see if the
So here's our create.
Okay.
That still works.
Okay.
If I hover over that, nothing's happening because we don't have an edit. Right? We never made an edit page. And if I hit delete,
You should.
it's going to crash because it's like, whoa, I don't know what you're doing. Right? It's just in the middle of something and it's confused because that's not what I asked it to do. Okay? So we've got some fixing up to do. Let's try delete first.
Okay.
All right. So let's go over here. We made an onGet. Let's go and make an onDelete.
Okay.
Same thing as before, with an action result, except now we're going to say on, and this is kind of weird, on post delete. The verb delete is a real HTTP verb,
Okay.
but it's not really often used from a browser's perspective. It's usually done as it's piggybacked on post. We use post to pass in basically all kinds of information. Whenever we hit submit on a form, we're posting that form. We're adding in, I think we said, page handler delete. So that is going to be here on post delete. And now we're going to say, hey, customer singular. And we'll go and get that customer
Okay.
out of the database. Before we delete it, we got to go and get it to make sure it's there. I say find by that ID that got passed in. So now we got to check to see if that customer is like null or not.
Yeah.
Because if it's null, then we don't even bother. If it's not null, do something. And then we can go and redirect
To a page.
to a page. Exactly. Thank you. So here, we're going to remove it from the database. And we're doing an into-memory database, but it doesn't matter, because if it was a regular database, it would remove it for us as well. That's what's nice about Entity Framework. I'm not a very good typer. Customer. So we remove the customer, and then we go and we save those changes.
Okay.
And then I would expect it would then redirect to the page, the same page,
Yes.
and I would expect that it would disappear from that list because it's going to go back to the database and build the list again. Does that make sense?
It does. Sure
I
does.
think that's what it will do. So we cross our fingers and hope that it works. And if it doesn't, we learn. Okay. That's not a good name. All right, We're deleting you.
Okay, I'm fine with that. It does work the way you
It does work. That's pretty cool. Fancy pants.
But now if we
edit, though, doesn't work because edit doesn't exist.
Edit is not there.
All right, so let's go and do edit then. So we'll do what you said before, add razor page, call it edit. Now I know you like routing. Routing is one of your favorite things about ASP.NET. So this edit page is going to be the first time that we've ever had a page that took in information.
Okay.
Where does that go? To pass in the ID.
So up there at page, right?
Right.
Quotes.
Quote, quote.
Yeah, and curly brackets.
Okay.
ID.
Yeah.
Dot. Int.
Okay, so the ID is of type int.
Yes.
That's the type hint. So this is saying edit /3.
So you'd see it in the browser, that's what it would look like.
Okay. We have our edit model. And then here at the top, we might have like edit. We could actually add a little bit of text here. We could say edit customer. And then we could say
dash model.
At model.customer. But again, we're not getting IntelliSense. Why not? Because the page model is different for each page.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's go look at the one for edit. So I'm going to
You're going to take
borrow again. Certainly, I could make another class, a base class, that would pull that appdb context in, so I wouldn't have to keep copy-pasting that. Because at some point, the copy-pasting becomes tedious. And you want to keep it dry, right? Don't repeat yourself.
We probably want that to survive the journey, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So we want to survive the journey with bind property. Okay. So we go back over to our page, and let's see if that worked. And it did, isn't that nice?
Yes, it is.
So now we can say we are model.customer.id, so we can say, edit customer 4 or whatever. And then a form, and then a form post. And there's lots of cool ways to make your forms easier to write. If you find writing forms tedious, there is a really great way to write forms that is called Emmet.
What is Emmet?
You ever heard of Emmet? Emmet, E-M-M-E-T. It's like the person's name, Emmet.
Okay.
And it's a way of describing what you want, you'd be like TRTD times 3, and then you'd hit tab, and it would go and expand it. It's a way to write tags for HTML really, really fast.
Is it built in?
It's built into to Visual Studio Code, but it is not built into Visual Studio yet.
Okay.
Notice how I got this here. As soon as I said ASP.NET 4,
yeah, it gave you
input 4 rather, it got that. This is really nice, right? So I can go and fill out these forms really quickly, and I don't have to worry about it. That's going to happen on the server side. Okay, so then we'll say a label, and this is a label also for
the customer's
name, which is nice. And then we'll say maybe another div, and then within there we'll have an input for customer name.
And then you're going to do the validation again, right?
I'll do I can do validation 2 different ways. I can do the validation summary, or we can do it like this, which is nice.
And what are the key differences?
This one is you have total control of what it looks like. You can put it anywhere, up or down.
Okay.
And this is just a bulleted list that's a roll-up of all of the stuff. Totally up to you how you want to do things. This is all inside of a form, right?
So you want to save it, right?
Yep, we're going to need a save button, exactly. So we'll put our button at the bottom. And it's just a regular old submit, nothing fancy about it. And it'll say save. But we're going to want to load this up and save it and have validation. We've done all that very nicely like this. And we just want to confirm, like you said on the back end, that we do the right thing. So on the get, actually let's do this. Let's run it first and then we'll try it again because right now we haven't hooked anything up. We haven't got it from the database. We haven't updated it from the database. But I would expect the links to at least work.
Yeah.
Because now there is an edit page. If there's not, then maybe I forgot something. Okay, look in the corner there.
Okay.
It's kind of hard for me to do that. I can take a screenshot. I can't really take a screenshot. Let's do this. I'll take a snipping tool. Give it a delay of 2 seconds.
You're that fast?
I am. Huh?
Oh.
So edit /1, right? So the route got built by the fact that it was in the edit, and then you had added that ID at the top there. So this is nice because we didn't have to hard code what a link looked like. That's really important. We said, make me a link that takes me here. We didn't say, make me a link that looks like this.
No.
So that's nice. And if we changed our things later, then it would change for us, which is nice. So here, if I click on that, I assume it'll just do, yeah, nothing. So it's like, I don't have anything there. It doesn't know about customer yet because we have the bind, but we never loaded the customers. So let's go and do our stuff again. We're going to have our action result. And here we're going to say on get,
Yeah.
of course, int ID. That's going to get passed in automatically because of the way we set up our routes, which is nice. So by default, we'll just return to the page. But here, we'll say customer, the one above. Go and get it from the database.
And find it, okay.
Yep, so find async, kind of a standard thing. You could pass in more complicated queries and get it other ways. If it's null, freak out. All right?
Yeah.
If customer equals null, I don't know. Let's put them back to index.
It's customer, right?
Yes, pardon me. Customer. Okay. Redirect. Oops, redirect to page index. A lot of typing, but we don't want to hide anything from you.
Keeping it 100.
We are absolutely keeping it 100. So this should load that up and give us a form with the customer in it. Let's see if it does, because we added that bind property, which you said, what did you call it?
Surviving the journey.
Surviving the journey. You saw that Idris movie where they survived the journey. Don't tell me what happens at the end.
So at the end.
I don't want to know. Okay, and then I hit edit, and then it works.
Exactly.
Right?
So what happens if you change
it, probably nothing. Right? So we don't have our post.
Exactly.
Exactly. So we've got our get, but we don't have our post.
So you could kind of copy that.
Yes, I thought there was a way. I think there's a way to actually generate that whole thing quickly. But we'll say on post async. All right. At the very end, we will do that redirect
to the index page.
To the index page, exactly. Okay. What do we do? Well, we've got that model state valid issue, right?
Yes, so like if not model.
Oops, not model state is valid.
Yeah, we want it to return to the page.
Okay. Page. See? You try to type too fast to impress people, and it just ends up making you look silly. Okay. Now this one's an interesting one.
Because you want to attach it to the database. Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're modifying something that's already in the database. So what we're trying to do is take this customer that we're currently editing.
So it's in the current state.
Attach that customer and the state of it in the database. We're going to mark that as modified. And this bit here,
it shouldn't be there.
Yeah, I don't want that.
Oh,
so I'm going to go and
yeah.
add the using statement. There we go. Now it's turned blue. Okay. Now, we don't know if it's going to work because someone else could be simultaneously editing at the same time.
Exactly. So you want to do a try and catch.
And do a try. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. And the exception that we're going to catch for is called a DB update concurrency exception.
So just in case someone's doing it.
Someone's in there at the same time, or it's gone,
what it says.
or whatever. You know,
Okay.
it's exactly what it is.
So you're going to wait for changes?
We're going to go and wait and say save the changes async, and presumably that'll work fine. If it doesn't,
Want to throw an exception?
now there's different arguments about the right way to do this, but for now I'm going to go and say customer, and this is kind of cool, customer.id. See how I'm getting IntelliSense
Yeah.
inside the string. We can do whatever we want to about that concurrency exception, but and maybe even pass it in as an inner exception. But the fact is, actually, that'd be a good idea. We'll pass that in along for the ride. We want to give a message to somebody that bad stuff has happened. All right. That should be. I think we've almost got CRUD, don't we?
We do. We've done the create.
Let's go see. I think the create was a post.
Yep.
The read is the for loop. The delete was also a post, but with a delete sidecar along for the ride. So create. Dan. Oh, breakpoints from before.
Oh, yeah.
I will remove those.
I think you still have, okay.
Continue. We'll bump into them if we have more. Fancy pants.
Beyonce.
Oh, that's a good point. Edit.
Carter.
Carter Knowles.
Yeah.
Don't get it twisted. Delete everyone else who's not worthy. All right.
Oh, so
See? It works.
it does work.
And there you go. Taking care of business. Cool.
So let's think about that.
So that's pretty sweet.
It is.
If we go back and just kind of review, particularly this bit here, we've got our edit with the route ID where we did not say
So what file
how
are
the
we
link should
looking
be.
at right now?
I'm sorry, this is index,
Okay.
right? So here we got an edit. I want to point out how it looks in the code, and then compare that to how it looks ultimately in the code, right? When it makes it all the way back to the browser. See?
It's edit.
So that came from this. Now this seems like a lot more. You might be asking yourself why you don't just hard code that, but routes change, pages change, things get moved around. Now this one's a little bit more interesting here, because you might have multiple buttons on the page that do different stuff. So then you can give them a handler name, right? I could have delete, I could have boldface Beyonce, I could have all caps.
Yeah.
Right? We could have whatever. You're not limited to one button. The submit button you can have multiple submits, still pass in numbers, like in this case ID,
Yep.
and this is an ampersand,
Yep.
multiple handlers, delete, promote, whatever.
Save,
Save,
whatever.
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And what's cool about that is that then that word delete, if we look at the behind, is this word. So I think you could even go like on post foo async or whatever, as long as it lines up, because you're saying on post and then some handler.
Yes.
Isn't that cool?
That is
And that
pretty
handler is like literally you could say, let me stop our debugging here.
You're going to try the foo?
Right, like it could be whatever, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
That word is totally up to you. So I don't need to test that. You just trust me. You don't trust me?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's test it then.
Okay.
Let's test it. That gives you a lot of flexibility
Okay.
with buttons. So I say foo right there. We go over here. We say foo. And And there you go. So while that's loading, what were you going to say?
No. I trust you. I just want to. I trust you-ish. I also see it in there.
Trust you-ish?
Yeah.
That's pretty good. I'll take that. Let's go and add people.
Okay.
That was foo.
How did Foo know it was delete?
Because it doesn't matter that it was named foo. It's just a handler name. And if we confirm it, did I pass it?
No.
Oh, this is create. Sorry. There you go. There's a delete. Okay. See, it says handler equals foo.
Yes. Oh, okay. Yes.
And then I just happen to name this handler foo also.
Yes.
So the point is, it lined up. And that's how you can have unlimited verbs. And then at that point, it just did the thing and removed it from the database. Cool?
Cool.
So we saw lots of different handlers like gets and posts and custom handlers like delete.
Yep.
We saw some tag helpers that will generate buttons and links for us. We saw layout pages.
We saw validation.
We saw validation, both summary and individual. And yeah.
Yeah, we looked at a little bit about routing in a little bit more detail.
We saw routing, and then specifically, actually one thing that would be worth pointing out about routing as well, if I click edit, did we, oh, I shut the app down again. You had said int, ID:int,
Yes.
where int was, you know, a number, correct? It would be interesting to just confirm that if we put in submit query, edit, she is 1.
Yes.
Put in a ID that is not an int.
You should get a.
You specifically get a 404. You don't get a 500. It's not an error. It's a route that doesn't exist. We
Yeah.
don't have an edit that takes a string. So that's another really, really important thing to point out about routing and why that little bit up there was so significant. And then soon in the intermediate sections, we will learn a little bit more about web APIs and URLs and mixing and matching pages as well. So
Yeah.
we take a short break and come back with a little bit of logging.
Yes, we will.
All right, we survived the CRUD.
Yeah, we did.
Create, read, update, and delete. We're going to add in some logging.
Yeah.
Do a little application insights locally. And then in the process of doing logging, I also want to add a little bit of thing called temp data.
Okay.
Because I was noticing that when we did the create, it'd be nice to have a little message that said Beyonce was created or whatever.
Ah, yeah, that would be nice.
But you know, that's not really part of the model. So that brings up some interesting questions. So for example, if we go back to create and just refamiliarize ourselves with that, right? We type in the name and we hit submit. And then if we look at the page model behind that, it's pretty straightforward, right? We have the customer that, as you say, with the bind property, survives the
Survives the journey.
But it'd be nice to have a message that would be some temporary piece of data that would say, oh yeah, customer got added.
Okay.
So we could go and have a string and call it message. This is interesting though because it's part of the page model, but not part of the database.
Yes.
This is part of the page model, which is kind of like a view model. This is really a temporary piece of data. It's temp data. And they're going to have their values stored, and then they'll be right back around the other side. So it's a sidecar. It's a little Post-it note. Okay?
Well, that's a good way to think
like
about
that?
it. Yeah.
Cool. So it's a place to put stuff. So I'm going to save the database, save the data right here like we did before. And then
You're going to have a message.
I'm going to have a little message, and we'll say, hey, customer, and this is where you can personalize stuff. Customer name added. It's a message, right? And it could come out of whatever you want. It could be generated. But here we're mixing and matching text with the data from the form. And I'm squirreling it away in this message here, which is not part of the database.
So by the simple fact that you've had the temp data, it said you're not going into the database.
Right, because I posted that, well, because I've actually never picked it up and put it anywhere near the database. If I did not put temp data on it, that would never get saved, and it would be null.
Okay.
But because it's public and it's on the page model, it's available to me, elsewhere. Okay. So let's go over to. Let me think about this.
Would you go to your index page?
Yep.
Or something?
Thank you.
Yep.
It took me a second to get my head right. So on the index page, we're going to go and make a message as well. That's going to catch that temp data, right?
Yep.
And then here, maybe we'll have some. We'll just stick it at the top of the form for now, and we'll say maybe an H3.
And some sort of message.
Model dot message.
Okay.
Okay. So it'd be empty, and maybe we'd want to hide it if it wasn't there or whatever. There's lots of things that we could potentially do, but for now, this I think will be fine. But this is just an example where it's not quite database stuff. You don't want to stick it in the database temporarily. You just want it to be somewhere temporarily.
Some sort of acknowledgement for the user.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the general idea of being able to, there you go.
There you are.
And that could look at whatever you want. You could do whatever you want. It could fade in with jQuery or animation or whatever makes you happy. And that's different from there, which is your default state, right? So we'll do it again. See? And it's because it was called temp data and we had the same name here and where it started. So it found its way magically over into the index area as well, which is pretty sweet.
Cool.
Cool. All right. Now we've talked a little bit about logging very, very briefly, but we didn't really do anything with it.
But we saw it appear.
We saw it there. We saw two different kinds of logging. We saw this one, and then we saw a little bit more there. So there was warning, and then there was, oops, pardon me. There was, yeah, there you go. There's warning, and then there's debug.
Okay.
And then you can have different subsections. You can say, well, I just want information from Microsoft, but I want debug from everybody else. Right?
Yep.
So let's go see if we can figure out how to do logging. All right, so go back over to here. And I'm going to try to remember how to do this from scratch. Do you, Hannah? Can you tell me how?
You got to try to remember?
Well, I just want to do it right, but I don't want to, I don't have all this stuff in my head all the time.
So it should be
you?
iLogger. Is it I? You probably need to add it as a service.
Yeah, so I've added it as a service.
And then we have to use it.
Yeah. So there's add logging. And then we've got app dot. I don't think it's used.
Do you put it up, so iLogger?
Yeah, I think it's iLogger factory.
I think it's, yeah.
See?
Yes, you have to add the extension.
Comes out of an extension. So yeah, that's good.
Guesswork makes for the best work.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Then we'll say, hey, logger factory. And you can say, well, if I'm running it at the console, I could add the console. Because you can log to all kinds of places, right? You can log to files. You can log it into Application Insights.
Yeah.
Do all kinds of things. And if you go and do Application Insights, that's going to ask you all kinds of questions as well. Right now, for now, I'm going to add console. I'm going to add debug.
Okay.
Now,
Do you need the first one anymore?
the console one is if I'm running it from the command line, and if I ever want to, I think I'd like to have that option.
Okay, so it's a choice.
Well,
So-
I'm going to be doing stuff, or someone on my team works in the console, and I'd like to be able to spit out to the console when possible.
So what I'm trying to point out is that you don't need both of them, right?
They don't. No, one. I'm pointing the logging to multiple locations.
Okay.
I could point it out to App Insights. I could put it in a text file. I could put it in a database. It would be weird, but I could do that.
Yeah.
So right now I'm sending sending logging to two places. Rather.
Okay.
Pardon me. Yeah. So yeah, it's cool to do that. And then, in a place that I might want to use it, remember how we put everything on one line there before? we're going to take it out. And I think I would say private I logger. And I think it would be of type create model. And I'll just say log. And then we say iLogger create model log, and then again we squirrel it away. Now here I am mixing things. Here this person went underscore DB, and I said capital L. You should pick a style.
So is the underscore really just a style?
It's just a style. It's like saying this is private, or it's read-only, or it's internal. There's lots of people have different styles. You tend to use capitals for publics.
Yeah.
There was a time when we used to say M underscore for secret member, you know. Now sometimes people put underscore for internal or read-only. I'm just, I should be more responsible in the way I name my things.
Yes, you should.
I should. It's sad. Okay. This string right here, I could maybe reuse.
And then make it for log, okay.
And I could say log.
Level?
Yeah, I could say log information, log debug, log critical. Let's say that that's critical. It's totally not critical. But I could say that's a bad thing. Oh my goodness, customer added, right? And then it might come out red, right? And actually that would be cool to try. So if I am in a web application, and where is my web application? It is down here. So let's go over to that location.
Yeah.
And I'll try .NET Run from the command line. This is a good reminder that you can do these things in Visual Studio, or you can jump back out into the command line. That's cool too.
So it's giving you
6405. Oops. So I'll put that there, and I'll put this here.
Oh, there it was. Critical.
Ah. All right? That's the console one. So the idea there is that that information could go lots of different places. So let's close that up.
We're going to see it in the debug.
And let's do, oops, and let's go and do it in Application Insights,
Okay.
which is cool. And you can see it in the debugger as well, right? You can. The point is that stream of information is going out into the world. It can go out into the command line. It can go out into a window. It can go into Windows debug, text file. Totally up to you. All right. So I'm gonna declare tab bankruptcy. This is too much. It's stressing me out. Okay. Go back over here. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to say Add Application Insights.
Okay.
And you've done this before many
I have.
times. Here's the trick, though. You can do this and sign up in Azure. You can use it for free. You get like, what, a gigabyte of space? Something like that. They'll go and register your app, and you can, even though you're running your app locally, send the telemetry up into the cloud. We'll do this a little bit later.
Okay.
But I want to point out to people that you don't have to do it that way. Okay? They would like you to sign up, and I think that you would get value if you signed up. But you can also try it local only.
Okay.
It's a little subtle. You can try it local only, which means none of your data will be sent up into the cloud.
But it's a data that you can export and put somewhere else. Like you can send a report to someone.
Sure. The point is that the cloud is going to give you a lot more insight. It's going to apply all the analytics, and you have a kind of an unlimited amount of space in the cloud. I think it's a gig for free, and then beyond that, you can do all kinds of things in the cloud you can't do locally.
Oh yeah.
But the point I'm making is that there's no reason not to try it out locally. You can do amazing stuff with it, even on an airplane. You know what I mean? So let's go and run this.
And you just added the App Insights.
Yeah, that's a good point. By running that, I just added that package.
Yep.
And it plugged itself into the pipeline. Okay?
Oh, so you didn't have to manually add it into your
No,
pipeline
didn't
at all.
have to do
So it's
anything.
automatically added by default?
Yeah, it's magic. I think we can actually look at the Let's go out to where that was. Where is that file located? The CS proj is here, and we can open it up. There it is.
There.
See?
Okay.
So it's just a package, and once it gets in there, it's plugged into the pipeline, and it's going to collect all kinds of stuff. But now I can go and really query my application. So it's running right now,
Okay.
to be clear. Let's go and do our creates and stuff. Then I'll come in here, and I'll say, look, see the numbers getting
Oh, yeah.
higher? Well, let me do that again.
So add a new one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So events are happening. So I can click on that, and this is what you want to get. This is sweet. I can see the number of requests, the number of traces.
You can filter it.
You can filter by just show me creates. Just show me people on this version. Just show me people on Chrome. Just show me people on Firefox. Just show me things that took longer than a second, right? You can go through this whole list here, and I could look for it. Look.
And it even has these really good icons, so you know what's what. Yeah.
See, remember how we made adding a customer a critical?
Yeah.
So I can double-click on that individual trace. Okay. So then we can see the name of the computer.
Oh, and the
See,
operation.
the severity, the operations, and I can then show me all telemetry for this user. So then you could say, well, I've got a bunch of users hitting this. This is where the local stuff will fall down at some point, and then you're going to want to go into the cloud. But one of the great options is something's occurred.
Yeah.
Beyonce has been added. Show me telemetry 5 minutes before and after.
Okay.
Right, because the bug might not be near her. It might be
around her.
around her, elsewhere on the elevator. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I can go and chart these things over time. Again, this is all local. This is the stuff you get locally. And then when you want to go beyond that, there's all kinds of great stuff in the Application Insights portal.
And this would link you right.
Link you right there, and you can go and check it out. And we will explore a bunch of that stuff in another talk. See, here, when you sign in, you can pick your resource and then see dependencies, how your application talks to the database, calls another web API, stuff you wouldn't be able to do if you didn't put it in the cloud. And here I've just added a filter, and I've said create. I can turn that filter off. Just show me the longest ones, filter on those. There's the record. There you go. One of the requests took a long time. Click on that. That was the initial get.
Okay.
The very first time it compiled that page. Isn't that fantastic?
That is fantastic.
Yeah,
That's
really
impressive.
Really like Application Insights. Cool. So I think that puts us in a pretty good spot, doesn't it? We've got a nice little CRUD application, basic bootstrap. It's talking to Application Insights. We've got logging. I think that's a pretty good beginner start, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, we've accomplished quite a bit over the past couple of hours.
Where should they go now? The docs.
The docs. Go to the docs. Go to docs.microsoft.com. Get started. Great samples, great interactive experiences, and if you see this, send Hanselman an applause.
So just say applause to us on Twitter,
On Twitter.
myself and Maria. And be sure to explore all the different great courses that are here at Microsoft Virtual Academy. This is just beginner ASP.NET Core. We've got beginner C#. We've got all sorts of great cloud-based content. There's an intermediate and advanced. There's Docker, and on and on and on. Thank you so much for spending your day with us here on Microsoft Virtual Academy.